Melissa, I've got 5 o'clock, but it appears we still need a couple of more members of the committee, so we'll pause here for just a couple of minutes.
Sounds good.
Hello, John and Harriet and Dave.
Hi there. I see.
Hello, everybody.
Looks like a beautiful sunset over there. I just got scared to death and saw the fire up ahead of us.
Yeah,
That smoke?
the slate fire is pretty impressive.
Oh,
Yeah.
what's going on? I didn't hear about that.
Oh, geez. Big
So-
thing.
Over 2,000 acres up just north of Kendrick Park. Moving to the northwest has got 180 closed because it jumped 180.
Oh, geez. It's on,
Oh, I had not heard that. Did that start today?
no, 2 days ago.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Wow.
The only good news about it is apparently it was naturally started. So at least Mother Nature.
Was it, Rob, was it dry lightning?
That's what they're saying. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Or-
That is sort of consoling. It's not somebody carelessly flipping a cigarette out.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not official yet, but that's the
All right.
general thought.
Okay. I've been evacuated once, and once was enough.
Yep. Melissa, our magic number is what? 6?
Be 7.
7. 5.
And I got an email from that I sent you from both Liz Baldwin and Sailor that they may be late. They both had a work commitment that we're running late.
Well, that's the 2 we need.
That would make, yep, it would be. Here's
I
Monica.
spoke with
Oh, great.
Supervisor Vasquez, and he said that he would be joining us later. He has another meeting as well.
Thank you for that. And welcome, Monica. We're looking for one more member so we can get started. We're all on Flagstaff time anyway. It takes about 5 minutes for everybody to get
Yeah.
here.
The Flagstaff 5. I'm not sure if it's
Flagstaff
5
time?
minutes or 5 hours.
Rob, you're being kind of generous if you're talking about 5 minutes. That's
They're,
multiplied by 3.
the Judicial Nominating Commission, the quorum is the number of people that show up.
Ah,
That's unique.
Yeah, it was the first, I never saw it anywhere else, but
Well, gee whiz, Dave, you could be the entirety of the commission under certain circumstances. And
actually there,
Dave, you're muted. Dave, just so you know, you're muted.
but what he said was really important.
I know.
For those of you that are just joining us, we're currently on a temporary hold awaiting one more committee member's presence so that we have a quorum and can get started with the meeting. We appreciate your patience.
Hey, what's the word on the fire out the dump road? I thought they had it, but there's a lot of smoke over there right now.
I hadn't seen it since this morning. I got up about 5:15 and it was really roaring.
Is that
Yeah.
a second fire?
It was a small one out the dump road area at about 5 a.m. I think it was reported.
Yeah.
But it was like a 1/4 acre and they said they had it.
I think it might have actually been in the dump because I saw a report that the on-site crew had put it out. So,
Yeah, and that they temporarily moved the dumping area.
right.
It's like my favorite place to go.
I believe it, Monica.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, it's just
You're
because I've
welcome.
been doing a lot more of the landscaping projects around here.
well, talking about the landfill, just think of it as landfill with a view.
Yeah. Well, and I actually finally got trash service. I've never, in all my 33 plus whatever years living here, I've always taken my own garbage to the dump. And I decided I was going to have trash service.
Congratulations.
Welcome. to
I know,
the
it's
21st
quite wild.
century.
I've had it for 2 rounds and I've already forgotten once to take the can out. So it's probably not going to go well. You can't teach an old dog new tricks.
How long do we wait?
Well,
Just
I have-
curious.
Couple of more minutes at least. One of the things that Melissa and Brian and I have talked about before is we have a couple of members of the committee that haven't been participating for quite a while. And so we're going to talk to the supervisors about whether we should no longer count them as part of the committee, and that would allow us to actually have a meeting today with the folks that we have here.
Yeah.
Since there's a couple that seem to never show up. So we'll wait and talk to them about that. Melissa has volunteered to do that for us.
Yeah, when we did this before and it took over 3 years to do it, about every year we kind of had to reevaluate who's really still participating and who isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, Rena, maybe you could pass that on to Supervisor Vasquez.
Yeah.
Him and Supervisor Begay have met on it, so.
Oh.
I don't know what came out of it, but I'm sure we'll have an update either this week or the next time we meet on that, just so it's.
well, we have more members of the community joining,
Excellent.
and I just emailed Evelyn. I do think she was out of town, but I had not heard from her. I think she had gone to out of state.
Well, she is back. They were back yesterday. They're my immediate neighbors to the east, so I can tell you, I think I saw her out in the arena of the corral this morning. I'm surprised she isn't here already.
Yeah, okay, because I did not hear that she wouldn't attend.
Could the person whose phone number ends in 8208 let us know what, at least your first name?
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Julie with Peak Engineering, and I support Coconino County in some of these efforts as a consultant, and I'm just listening in. Unfortunately, I do not have internet at the house right now, so I'm calling in.
No
Hi,
problem.
Julie.
Welcome, Julie.
Thanks for joining us, Julie.
Absolutely. Looking forward to hearing the conversation this evening.
And just so you know, everybody, we are still waiting for 1 or 2 committee members to join us so we can get started with a quorum.
One more, right?
One more.
Yeah. This seems to happen whenever I chair. I wonder what that means.
I'm not sure that that's entirely true.
I'm trying not to take it personally.
Oh, no.
Okay, Evelyn just emailed. She's having some technical issues. She's trying to get into the meeting.
Excellent.
So hopefully if she's got email, she can make it.
John, go ahead and yell at the window and invite her over.
Yeah, I guess I could do that, but I was going to tell both you and Brian I may be responsible for another one who's not here. I was on the phone for quite a while with Liz Baldwin this morning, discussing some aspects of, well, some of the background for zoning code and other plans such as the regional and county plans. So
Well, John,
she
she
heard too much.
no, she has a work meeting that's running late, as does Sailor. So
Come on, Melissa, where's your sense of humor?
John, I think that's not why she would be late. She loves it.
Well,
Yeah.
try to help her out as much as possible.
Thank you.
To with the understanding of some aspects of this.
Well, we appreciate all of your help with that. Is your internet is obviously working, John?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so your neighborhood is okay with connections.
Well, I think that Evelyn is on a different branch of it, different node. I'm almost at the end of one. The node that they're on comes up via cable along Copeland Lane. And I am served off the cable that goes up Campbell, believe it or not. Kind of odd how it's split up. So that may be part of the problem.
Well, you're lucky you have something at all. We have to rely on Speed Connect out here, and it is not speedy or connective.
Well, Suddenlink isn't a whole lot better.
Well, I would differ with you there, but that's okay. God, I get frustrated.
Yeah. Initially, when Suddenlink took over from the old NPG network, they had some real problems. And up where Rob and I are is Lightning Strike Central. And it seems like their call center in India could not comprehend that a lightning strike would take out some of their infrastructure and do it on a regular basis on top of that.
I think Evelyn's coming in now. Evelyn, is that you joining?
That looks like Evelyn.
Yeah, my other computer won't let me in. The mail stopped accepting my email. So I'm trying to do this until Chris can get my mail going.
Well, that's working just fine, and congratulations, you're our quorum. So we can now get started.
Okay.
Appreciate you getting signed in.
If I have to leave again, the other computer.
Okay, hopefully we'll have a couple other members joining us who both let us know they would be a little bit late today, so
okay,
good to go. So we can officially kick this meeting off. We have a quorum. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rob Wilson. I co-chair this committee along with Brian Bates, and we're both very happy to see all the members of our committee, and especially all the members of the public here participating in this very important process of defining the Doney Park Timberline Fernwood area plan. This evening, we're going to go through an agenda of, because we're meeting during dinner hours, and Melissa thinks it's important that we all have some pizza. So there is our pizza for the evening. Some virtual meeting instructions. It's important if you're not actually speaking at the time to have your audio muted so that it doesn't interfere with other folks and makes it easier for the rest of everyone to be able to hear. That's very much appreciated. If you do have any problems connecting, the phone number and that information is provided there for you. You could, worst case, call in and just listen that way. And for those folks that are calling in, we are reading the majority of anything that we're reviewing, so that even if you don't have the video, you will be able to hear what it is we're talking about, or hear what we're seeing. And our agenda for the evening, Melissa. There we go. So we're going to go through some quick introductions. We'll ask each of the members of the committee to introduce themselves. In the interest of saving some time, we'll probably defer the public, the general public, from introducing themselves until the public comment period. If you have a comment to share, we definitely are anxious to hear that and would appreciate if you could make sure you state your name in the beginning so we know exactly who we're hearing from. And with that, I think we'll start with the committee members, and I'll just go what I see on my screen. Dave, you want to start?
Sure, just let me get unmuted. I've been living here in Doney Park since '06, and have been involved in quite a few boards and committees and things in the county and like that. So I've just been doing, I'm retired, been doing.
Well done.
Thank you, Dave. John?
Okay, unmuted. John Ruggles. I am on the Planning and Zoning Commission representing District 2. Been there for about, 9.5, a little more than 9.5 years now. And I think that's enough for everyone.
Thank you, John. Harriet, could you say hello for us?
Hello, Harriet Young. I've been here 30 years, retired NAU political science professor.
Thank you very much. Brian. There you go.
This is Brian. I am the co-chair along with Rob. I live in District 4, and I've been here in Doney Park for nearly 40 years.
Thank you, Brian. Monica.
Hi, I'm Monica. I've been out here since '88. I was on the committee 20 years ago that wrote the plan that we're looking at now, and I'm also retired.
And did we lose? Wait a minute. We had everyone. Who would I miss here? Oh, there we go. Evelyn.
Yeah. Okay. Been in flag 40, Evelyn Wani, been in flag for 42 years. Timberline, 11 years. Representing District 2. I live in Timberline, and I just woke up, so I'm not real good on this. So that's it for now.
We're just happy to see you here. All right, I think that's everyone on the committee that is here. We have a couple of key members from our local community. Melissa Shaw is our MC monitor, teacher in charge of all the discipline for those of us that get out of line and everything else. So Melissa is muted. Melissa, maybe.
My apologies. I realized I was muted. Melissa Shaw, long range planner with the county, and Liz is joining us now, Liz Baldwin.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for letting Liz in. And let's
give her a second to connect.
Looking at my screen here. Erin, I guess the Supervisor Vasquez will be here a little bit later. Did you want to say hello for him?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Arena, like a sports arena. I'm the district director for Supervisor Vasquez with District 2, aka the new Teresa. Right now he's on the FUSD anti-racism, anti-bias committee meeting. So the update he did give me was just, I mean, I know his calendar, so I mean, I know where he's been. But we've been doing a lot of different meetings. Something that he wanted to just reiterate to the committee is, you know, the gratitude for all of your time and efforts to be out and about doing this, taking time away from family and friends and life to come and do this. But also just that he is working on finding out what is a possibility with that 80-acre parcel. Right now it's deemed as floodplain stuff. It's not changing, but there could be something in the works. And so to look at that and to see what the community really wants. I know we were really grateful for the input at the last meeting from some people talking about, you know, like easy walkway paths, you know, dog park, kind of those communal things that are part of what this area is looking to do. So we've taken those considerations into mind as we do find out and research some more ideas that maybe the feds will let us use that land at a point in time. So it's in the works. Hopefully all of you got our newsletter, and if you have anything to add, just email me or Supervisor Vasquez and we can add some things into it. It's going to be on a monthly basis, so I'm aiming for the 3rd Monday of June to get that one out. So just keep an eye out. We also have paper versions of it too, if that's easier for people. We had our last Meet in the Streets meeting for the museum fire flood mitigation last night, and so that series has ended now, but of course people can always come and ask us questions. The one thing we're really partnering with United Way on right now is a volunteer day for residents who maybe aren't in that disabled or elderly category but need help to get sandbags put up or replenished. So if you or other people you know want to volunteer, We're asking that you just reach out to United Way. That way you can sign up to be a volunteer, and you don't have to lift sandbags to volunteer. They were very adamant that you could do admin kind of work or phone calls or something, because it takes a lot of manpower to do all of that kind of outreach. And right now, because of COVID, volunteers are really scarce. So we're just trying to get the word out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And thanks again for being here. And I will stop talking so all of you can get to business.
Thank you very much. I see Liz has joined us. Welcome, Liz. Could you give
Thank
us
you.
a quick hello?
Yes. Yes, Liz Baldwin, nurse practitioner, been in Doney Park for 27 years and on this joyous committee since inception, a year plus now. Enjoying it and proud of it. And I just want to thank all the community members that are here speaking out and letting your voice be heard, because it takes a village to be a village. So thank you for everyone that's coming out in the community to share your thoughts.
Thank you, Liz.
Yep.
All right, Melissa, did I miss anyone I should have called on here?
No, I don't see anyone else. on the
All right.
committee.
How many people do we have? A quorum? Do we?
Yes, we do. A quorum plus one.
Oh, okay.
No, you're our plus one tonight, Liz. Okay, so I think that covers the welcomes, introductions. We're going to go into public comment now. Is that correct, Melissa?
Yes.
And we, as everyone has mentioned, are anxious to hear from our neighbors here in this area about their thoughts and concerns in this process. We do ask that you try to keep your comments limited to 3 minutes so that everyone is treated equally and fairly. Make sure that you unmute your microphone and let us know what you have to say. There isn't any good way to do this other than if you know how to raise your hand in Zoom, feel free to do that. Otherwise, you can raise your hand in real life, and we'll try to go around here and call on folks as we go. Anyone have something they would like to say? Mr. Leroy is waving hello.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, so I just wanted to say thank you. I have been pretty antagonistic towards this committee for a long time, and I met with Mr. Ruggles and Don 2 weeks ago, and they were kind enough to give me as much time as I needed to have a lot of the concerns, questions, and confusion that it turns out that I had with respect to the work of this committee. So I wanted to extend a formal apology to all the committee members, number one. Number two, I wanted to thank John personally for the time and the answers and the transparency and the friendship that he extended to me during that coffee meeting that we had 2 weeks ago. And John, if you would relay my thanks, which I've already relayed to Don again, but if you could say thank you to Don again. It was incredibly illuminating, and I support your work 100%. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Leroy. That leaves the floor open for the next public comment. And I am not seeing any hands raised, but there's got to be someone else out there who'd like to share something with us. If so, please speak up.
Rob, this is Brian Bates.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Leroy, I'd like to thank you as well for one. You have raised some good questions. Yes, there have been some concerns, but I do appreciate your reaching out, your learning more, and your sharing with this committee.
Thank you, Brian. So the floor is open for any other public comments.
Rob, I see Daniela Harrison had raised her hand.
Please, Danielle.
Hey guys, sorry, I'm trying to go where it's a little bit quieter. Well, I wanted to, first of all, thank you all for being on again and taking the time. These meetings have been so educational and so helpful for the whole neighborhood. And I actually just came over from some of the neighbors' houses, and everybody is really excited to hear about the progress you guys are making. And we're looking forward to seeing the finished product as it's coming together. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'm sure all of us are honored to be able to help our neighbors out with this important work here.
And it looks like Lisa has raised her hand as well.
Lisa, please let us know what you have to say.
Hi all, this is my second meeting that I've attended, and I am concerned about losing our access to Forest Service lands when new development comes in. So I'm just curious to see how we're gonna work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I think we do have a topic on that coming up here shortly, so stay tuned.
I don't see anyone else with a hand raised.
Okay, so
Unless
last
I'm
call
missing
for
something.
public comment. If you're here and have something to share, please unmute yourself and let us hear it. Hearing none, we will move on to our next slide here. So there had been some questions and comments received by Melissa via email and I think some other sources since our last meeting. One of them relating specifically to equestrian access out there in Slayton Ranch Road, and another about the area plan and its how it fits into or plays along with issues relating to water regulation. And do we have separate slides for those, Melissa, or are we going to discuss those here?
No, we would just discuss them here on this slide.
Okay. So the equestrian access through Slayton Ranch, who is going to address that?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. And so that was an email that I received actually and forwarded. Both of these were emails that the committee has received. And the question about equestrian access was regarding access that had been available until Slayton Ranch was developed. And there isn't a current policy in the 2001 area plan that you all have discussed and are carrying over so far into this plan that would basically encourage all new developments to consider maintaining and to providing access to Forest Service lands so that's not blocked off. So we're working to do a bit of research into this particular question. It gets a bit technical in terms of the types of easements, but there were easements created with Slayton Ranch subdivision for pedestrian, equestrian access, as well as obviously public utilities and emergency access. So, you know, there were some details to that that the homeowners association actually will probably be in better position to answer. But that is something, as Lisa just brought up in her just a minute ago, wondering how this area plan will deal with that. That is a policy that was looked at when Slayton Ranch was developed and was recognized by the easements that were put in place. They may not be 100% perfect in terms of location, but it is something that the county does look at very closely when reviewing and approving subdivisions, new subdivisions in particular, obviously, to maintain access where there is existing access.
Melissa, on that, didn't we in a previous meeting discuss the need to make sure those access easements are properly signed or identified?
That's right. And there, I believe there are several draft policies
Right.
in other chapters, not the land use chapter, although there may be something that touches on that. And they all do address maintaining, in particular, equestrian access, because that's been a topic that the committee has been concerned with and has known is important to the community, as it also was pointed out in the survey. So there are, as you mentioned, there are several policies that touch on that in terms of both easements as well as signage. And I believe there are a couple others in terms of maintenance and also then encouraging that possibly even easements be obtained where they don't exist to improve that access where it's desired and where it would make sense for the Forest Service as well.
Right. All right. Thank you. Any
This is,
members have any questions or thoughts to share on that?
This
I have
is
a
Brian.
question. Oh, I'm sorry, Brian. Go ahead. It's Harriet. Go ahead.
I live on Slayton Ranch Road, and I want to make clear, I believe that what we're doing is this comment is about Slayton Ranch Estates. Because there are some access points off of Slayton Ranch, and they're at Slayton Ranch Estates in the northwest corner, northeast corner. It's in the northeast corner. There is access through there, and that I believe is a deeded access, and it is marked.
Right, and there are obviously, complications that arise when, for instance,
Yeah.
gates get locked and where they were not previously locked and when people don't seem to have keys. So those are some of the kinds of details that we get asked questions about and try to help people find at least contacts to track that down and figure out, who has the key and why was it locked. So it's not something that we can always figure out, but we make an attempt starting with homeowners associations and things like that. So yeah, just kind of a little bit more history on that question.
Yeah, I have just a question. Are the access, the deeded accesses visible anywhere so that all the residents know where
Yes.
they are? And so
They
the
are,
have
Harriet,
access.
and where you have to look, and that's where, we're always happy to take time, not necessarily in this meeting, but they're on the subdivision plats.
Okay.
And they're available online, pretty easy to access. But we're always happy to help people read those.
And is anybody actually blocking anybody from using those accesses? Is there
Well,
a real, someone just not cooperating?
I don't know all the specific details, but I know that there were some concerns that there was a lock on a particular gate, and I don't know where that gate is.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah,
Just curious.
this is not an uncommon occurrence, so we try to help out whenever we can, but it's not always going to be a county fix, if you will. If it's a private access easement and somebody has locked a gate, we can certainly point people in a direction. I see 2 people have raised their hand on this. One is Evelyn Wani.
Yeah, I was just wondering, wasn't there an email on a concern also with the same problem at Johnson Ranch?
I don't recall one on the recent email was about Slayton Ranch.
Okay, thanks.
The answer though is basically the same for both of those scenarios. Is that right, Melissa?
That's correct. And then I see a member of the public has raised their hand on this question. What? Lisa has raised her hand on this.
Are we past public comment though?
We are past public comments, so I would suggest, Lisa, if you like, put your question in the chat, if you have that ability, and then I can share that with the committee.
Worst case, if you don't make it through the whole meeting, you'll still get an answer back from the chat.
But if you could please put it in the chat, that would be great.
Thank you for that. Moving on to the area plan and water regulation, questions came up about how much of an impact we can have in the area plan with respect to conservation of scarce water resources. And maybe before we start that topic, we should all take just a second and pray for some rain.
Yes, that would be nice. And we'll talk about this a little bit further later on in the presentation. But there was an email that had very specific concerns about how this plan may or may not actually impact water use in the Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood area. So we'll talk a little bit more specifically about that in just a bit, if that's okay.
Okay.
I'd like to add one comment that should get something started in the right direction on this. As a result of the discussion I had with Mr. Leroy and Don Walters last week, it has got me doing a little bit more research, but I would simply recommend to anyone who has questions about how water is regulated that they pull up online using Google, Arizona Revised Statutes, Chapter 45. And if you've got 2 or 3 days to read it, please do that. It is very detailed, but it is written in plain English. So that will explain how the county, without an active management area for water, is extremely limited. So that's enough.
Thank you, John. And Melissa, I think we can move on. I hope the rest of the committee members have had a chance to look at the meeting notes that were presented or emailed to you a couple of weeks ago now. And if anyone has any comments on those, now would be a good time to share those. Our wildlife manager slant note taker must have done a great job, so we will accept those as they were presented and move on to the next topic.
Okay. So Rob, just to clarify and just to go in for the record, did you want to have a committee vote on the minutes, on the meeting notes from May
Sure, why
13th and
not?
20th? Okay.
I need a motion to approve the notes as presented.
I
This is
approve the notes
Brian.
as presented.
I second.
Go ahead.
So we have a first and a second. Thank you very much. All those
Sure.
in favor of approving the notes as presented, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. There we are. We're official, Melissa.
Thank you. Okay, here's the next slide.
So topic updates and refreshers, moving on. Talking
Okay.
about water resources, which I think we kind of just did. Is there?
We did, and I'll just add a little bit more to that because John Ruggles, Commissioner Ruggles is right. The Arizona Revised Statutes has very detailed information. That's where we at the county derive our authority for how we can or cannot recognize, or rather regulate water resources. But that's also really well described in our very own comprehensive plan. So I would just also recommend for a much shorter read, not days and days, about a 3-page read on water resources, pull up from our county webpage, the Coconino County 2015 Comprehensive Plan, go to page 45, and that's where this description begins, and it's very well written here. So it just basically points out that, you know, the county does recognize water security is very important for both stability and growth, but the county is not a water provider. So that is one major nuance to understand. And then the water and the regulatory framework around water, you know, is pretty clearly addressed in the text and the goals and the policies of the comprehensive plan. And then also the area plan that you're drafting does have, in particular, some water conservation goals. So that will complement what's in the comprehensive plan. And as John mentioned, then the revised statutes, I believe, also point to the Arizona Department of Water Resources, or ADWR. They actually administer the statute, and they regulate surface water and groundwater laws and codes. And then just a note of interest, there is the Coconino Plateau Water Advisory Council and Watershed Partner Interagency Groups, and they are looking at a regional level in terms of in the county as far as water security. So that is, again, talked about in the comprehensive plan, but that's a bigger effort that may in the future result in some additional strategies for the county in terms of how to manage water resources. So just wanted to put that out in terms of a little bit more information.
Melissa, one comment on this. There is one place where the county is enabled by statute to have some control. And that is when you locate your septic system adjacent to or near a well on your property. Then you have to go to our Department of Environmental Quality for an okay
Right.
on the location of it. And right now, the way it stands, that's about all the county can do.
Thanks, John.
You bet.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? We just wanted to cover that real quickly because it did come up in an email. It was a concern.
I think we've got that covered.
Okay.
Moving on.
And is Jess with us? Can you hear me, Jess?
He's there. There he is.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, Jess had offered to take on this slide for us.
Because this is the easiest one to take on. So pretty simply, I think we've continued to have some questions about language in the area plan as a land use policy document, and why there are some old area plans in the county that use the word shall, and the county has moved in a direction of not using the word shall or anything that would appear as an ordinance in land use policy area plans. So this was covered early on in the area plan update process with the committee, but I think we've continued to get some questions about it. And really this slide that Melissa has put together here really explains it quite well, along with graphics. The comprehensive plan and the area plans are goal and policy documents. They essentially provide guidance for decision makers, and it's really in the best interest of county planning process to not misrepresent those policy documents as ordinance. So they tend to use the word should and avoid the word shall, whereas the zoning ordinance and along with John's recommendations about the Arizona revised statutes, I would encourage anyone and everyone to read through our zoning ordinance. You could probably get through in a few hours. Zoning ordinance is an ordinance and is obviously chock full of the word shall, because it's an ordinance that we use, that the county used to administer permitting for development. So big difference there when something is ordinance versus something being guidance for decision makers. The county attorney had recommended to the board of supervisors that that this be the direction the board take in the future. So we do recognize that some old area plans do have the word shall in them. The board of supervisors took that recommendation from the county attorney and concurred. Concurred that this better serves the community in making the distinction between ordinances and policy guiding plans. So that's where we're at.
Thanks, Jess. And Rob, I want to recognize that Supervisor Vasquez has just joined the meeting.
He is. Welcome, Supervisor Vasquez. Would you like to say a quick hello?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm late. Just got done off another meeting, but I'm glad to join you and looking forward to seeing our progress.
Thank you very much. Hope you got a chance to get a bite to eat in between.
I'll do my best. Thank you.
Okay, I do see there's a chat message from Doug Meyer. And Doug, I do recall your question from last meeting. We did not address that earlier today. And we owe you an answer for sure. I don't know that we prepared for that though, and I want to make sure the answer we give you is a quality answer. So if you will accept my apologies on that and promise that we will get you an answer, hopefully this week, that we can email out to you, and then at our next meeting cover it also. I hope that will help at least. And with that said, I think we can move on to our next slide there, Melissa. We get into the real work of what we do here, and we're going to begin reviewing the rest of the chapter that we've been working on for what, 3 or 4 meetings now? And
right.
Tonight, we're going to finish it up. So moving on, going to open up that text document.
Do you see the screen where we're going to review the draft vision statement
Yes.
again, just to keep that fresh? So we'll go through those quickly. And here's the first part of that, the natural resources, open space, and environment vision.
Just, Melissa, just for the general public's understanding, the way this hierarchy works is we have a vision, and then we have, under the vision, we have goals, and then under the goals, we have policies. So the visions that where Melissa's about ready to read for us are the ones that apply to this particular chapter, and then we're going to be reviewing the policies and the goals and policies after that.
Right, and then the goals and policies will support the vision.
Right.
Right, so this is natural resources, open space, and environment. The draft vision reads, our community's priority for the future of Doney Park Timberline Fernwood is to maintain and protect the natural environment, resources, and open spaces that reflect our rural lifestyle and values. We value the biodiversity of our native flora and fauna and the open space that surrounds our community. Access to public lands, trails, and multi-use path systems is important to maintain our quality of life, and we encourage our partners and neighbors to establish safe and legal access easements to these amenities.
And
community character and values. Our community character is influenced by our rich cultural and historic diversity, natural environment, and open space. expansive vistas, dark skies, the natural quiet, and rural lifestyle. The diversity of our community is reflected in our history and place names: Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood, Winona, Cosnino. Our closely connected community reflects our independent lifestyle, recognizes our reliance on each other for social support, and strives to be inclusive, fair, and safe. Our community character is reflected in large lots, a variety of building styles, and a recognition of geographic differences that reflects the country living we value.
Thank you, Melissa.
And the third part of the draft vision statement is land use, growth, development, and partnerships. Our area plan supports responsible land use and planned growth that maintains our rural lifestyle and character. We embrace a future that accommodates residents while ensuring that new and additional development is integrated into our community in a manner that respects cultural and historic resources, supports community values and aesthetics, and considers the environment and long-term viability of natural habitat and water resources. And the last section of the draft vision is on transportation. The transportation system in Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood integrates and connects multimodal facilities for transit, pedestrian, bicycle, and equestrian users throughout and beyond the planning area. Our future envisions transportation corridors that are safe and accessible for wildlife, motorists, and all known motorized users. Enhanced opportunities for transit and commuter options are possible at key locations throughout the planning area.
That's a lot of vision.
Okay, any comments or questions from the committee?
I think we can move on. And
Rob, this is just a review of what you've covered so far in terms of going over the draft goals and policies, and here we are.
getting close.
Getting close, transportation and circulation. It is in fairly good shape. We'll be presenting that to you next, and that will be the last element to review before we can schedule an open house.
Let's get to work.
All right, let's get to work. So let me stop sharing the screen. Okay, let me see here. Did that display?
Yes.
Okay. And does it need to be larger?
Sure. Till it fills your screen. There you go.
How does that work for everybody? Larger?
Try it one more. That looks like about as big as you can make it and still be able to see everything that's on there. So.
Okay. So
we had completed up through LU2 at the last meeting. So we're starting this evening's meeting at land use goal number 3.
right. And this would actually be policy number 3.
Or policy, excuse me, yes.
Right. And we can just, for refreshers, look at the goal that it is nested under. And if you like, I can read that.
Please.
So the rural character of the area is preserved by ensuring new residential development to maintain existing gross zoning densities on private lands within the Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood area plan boundaries. All new development should remain on private lands within the rural growth boundaries identified by the Flagstaff Regional Plan. So that is the goal as is currently drafted. And then there are so far 2 policies with several sub-policies under that, and we've landed on 3 right there.
So the important thing to keep in mind is here we're talking about residential development at this point, and this specific one is talking about subdivision development.
And so I'll just read this. So all new subdivision developments should comply with the following standards in Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood. So this is, as Rob just mentioned, directed specifically at subdivisions. And the first one, 3A, is about design. And I can read these again for people that don't have a visual on it.
Please do.
All subdivisions should be designed with integrated conservation design with emphasis placed on creativity. Lot length width ratio should not exceed 2:1. Traffic calming street design is strongly encouraged, and multimodal connections to linkages throughout the planning area should be incorporated into the subdivision design. Paving of subdivision streets is encouraged to minimize dust.
Any committee comments on land use 3, item A? Hearing none, we'll move on.
And so under LU3, there's A, B, C, D, E, and F, just to put that into context here. So B is related.
Melissa,
Yes.
excuse me for interrupting. If we could go to A for just a minute, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Where you say traffic calming street design is strongly encouraged. What I'm understanding that to mean is that the streets are designed so that you're not having long straightaways that facilitate drag races, or is causing the traffic to be slower as opposed to the streets all being 35 miles an hour. Is that accurate?
That is generally what is understood by traffic calming. It is intended to, even though a street may be posted for a slow speed, if they're straight and long, as we know, people tend not to pay attention to the speed limit. So traffic calming is intended to mitigate that. And remember, though, the street design will be reviewed in the subdivision process when those applications are submitted by our engineering department and through the engineering design manual. So this is a policy, though, that will help to guide the subdivision review. But just do remember, this is the first blush, if you will. And then the engineering standards will be applied to those subdivisions as it works through the subdivision process. Does that make sense?
Thank you for the clarification. Yes.
You're welcome. Okay.
And traffic calming could also include things like the bathtubs they built in Flagstaff in the middle of the road. Those kinds of things that would help slow traffic.
What are the bathtubs? I'm sorry.
Those little islands that they built in the middle of the roads downtown.
I guess that's a technical term I wasn't familiar with.
Well, yeah, I jokingly refer to them as bathtubs in the middle of the road.
And developers have also included things like traffic circles, which I have seen people go around the wrong way on when they are done, when they're installed. But that's Arizona. What can I say?
Moving on to B.
B is in regard to floodplain. No development should be allowed in county restricted floodplains. Conservation easements should be recorded for floodway areas. Pedestrian and equestrian trails, a minimum of 20 feet wide, should be required along all floodplains. So this is an existing policy. This is something that's in your current area plan.
Melissa, I have a question about the 20-foot wide.
Right. Yes, go ahead.
What is the source of 20-foot wide, and wouldn't that make it particularly difficult and maybe be a lot wider than is necessary to accomplish the intended goal?
I think this may be an old standard that we should take a closer look at.
You know, I'd like to see those kinds of easements, but if you force them to be 20 feet wide, when they could be, perhaps 10 feet wide and still be equestrian safe.
It might be best just to leave the width undesignated unless there are some different opinions on that.
I think Rob is correct about this. We have done this with numerous plans and have gone with widths for trails less than 20 feet. So I'm not really too sure where that one came from, but
right. I think it
would be best to leave it out.
Right. I
dimension.
agree. I think it's an older standard that we probably overlooked when we were reviewing these. So I would suggest removing that.
Sounds like we even have a cat that agrees. So we will go
I
ahead
think so.
and-
Well, they know best.
Hey, no, this is
Sorry
Jess.
about
The county engineering design construction manual does have some standards for multimodal paths. So that tends to be the default once you go into the
Right.
subdivision process.
So we don't have to do it here.
This
Okay.
is Brian. Would it be well then to reference the multimodal, what I want to say, regulations or guidelines that Jess just referenced?
Well, they'll have to do that as part of this development. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right.
I understand that it's implicit. Is it necessary to make it explicit? And that's a question, not a request.
Well, I'll add one thing to that, there are going to be paths, access routes that are part of a subdivision that may not require the use of the design manual in terms of width or construction. That may be up to the developer. And then again, that comes back to planning and zoning and then ultimately the board of supervisors. So just strictly saying that it's got to be something that is in accordance with the design manual may not be such a good idea right here.
Okay.
It might be similar to, the idea of referencing the zoning ordinance every time, which I don't believe is necessary. That's something that is, although it is referenced, for instance, down here, I think it will get redundant into this kind of document and is not needed. I would echo John's comment.
Yeah, a policy document like this really shouldn't be too specific about something like that because the requirements may change in the future. Whereas this document's probably going to be good for hopefully the next 20 years.
Okay, so any other comments on item B there? Moving on to item C.
Okay, so C, again, this is related to a subdivision buffer zone, a perimeter buffer zone of lots equal to or greater in size to the adjacent and or abutting minimum parcel size as specified by zoning should be provided on all boundaries of a PRD abutting agriculturally or residentially zoned land. This requirement should not apply to those PRD boundaries abutting Forest Service lands or state or county roadways.
Any committee comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to Delta.
Okay, so D is regarding lighting. If outdoor lighting is to be provided, it shall be in compliance with section 4.3 lighting of the zoning ordinance. Street lighting should be permitted only at major intersections, and an outdoor lighting plan should be submitted in conjunction with each subdivision development proposal. Outdoor lighting should comply with Zone 2 astronomical requirements. And in this instance,
What?
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I think maybe you might going to address it because I was going to ask the first statement. Are you going to be addressing that? Because that's kind of.
Which statement, Liz?
Well, I was thinking the lighting, if outdoor lighting is to be provided. And that to me, when I read that, it means like not an individual housing. I thought it meant like it was be providing on the streets and on another.
Right.
And I was saying street lighting should only be permitted at major intersections. So I was saying, why do we have this? Because we're not going to have street lighting on the streets except at major intersections.
Could it be
Unless there's a
landscaped
common
areas,
area.
or it could
Sorry,
be
go ahead.
landscaped areas, or it could be
Mhm.
entrances to subdivisions that are,
Oh.
signs. It could be, a playground in the subdivision, or something like that. Any outdoor lighting needs to comply regardless.
Okay. I thought it was trying to say if they had street lighting, and I was like, we're only going to have street lighting at major intersections. Okay.
That does, that's addressed. So.
Okay.
Hey, just a quick comment on the street lighting. That is not a part of the current lighting ordinance. It is to be in the updated ordinance, and it has been very simply dealt with in the proposed wording for that. that you can use street lights, but they have to be narrow spectrum amber lighting, which is readily available now for things like street lights or other area lighting applications. So this reads just fine like it is. The section 4.3, that number and the formatting of it and the zoning ordinance shouldn't change.
Are there subdivisions in Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood that have outdoor lighting in any common area or along any streets?
No, there are not currently. So far, the only place in the county where there have been questions about street lighting have been in Mountain Air. And I think we've heard from a lot of people in public comment so far that preservation of dark skies is extremely important. I think one place where we have outdoor lighting, there is some outdoor lighting at Peaksview Park and also Cromer School. And currently the Cromer School lighting does not meet, at least the last time I was by there after dark, did not meet the requirements of the zoning code section 4.3. But I believe they are going to be updating that to do just that in the very near future, if not already.
So I would question whether we need to cite a specific section. John, I recognize that right now 4.3 is correct, but considering this document is only scheduled to be updated once every 10 years and could be as long as 20, evidence today. Just citing the lighting section of the zoning ordinance might be a better thing to do here.
Yeah, that should be quite adequate. And one other comment as far as zone 2, that should stay in until the ordinance is updated. And astronomical requirements kind of is a term that is not in the ordinance. Just lighting zone 2 would be quite sufficient.
Thank you, John. That's a good update.
Lighting zone 2. Okay. All right.
John, yeah. How does that read? Okay, moving on.
Yes, please.
So E, development concept, all PRD, and just recall PRD means plans residential development. And in this policy document early on, there's a policy that encourages all new subdivisions to be developed as a PRD or planned residential development. And so this addresses that. All PRD developed with an underlying theme or concept should be compatible with the rural residential character of Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood.
Committee questions, comments on item Echo? Hearing none, we can move on to Foxtrot.
Okay. Developers of new subdivisions should be required to fund and provide for any required infrastructure improvements both on and off site, and should not cause any undue financial burden on existing area residents or the county.
Kind of hard to argue with that one. Any comments?
Yeah, that'll keep us on track at the Planning and Zoning Commission level.
Yep.
And again, a lot of these are existing policies updated, brushed off and refreshed.
All right.
Okay, moving on to LU4. This is the county should continue to lobby the state legislature to add further restrictions and controls on the minor land division process. And we've talked about this and the impacts that minor land divisions have, not just in Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood, but across the entire county. In that's where you've seen those instances of multiple land divisions and lot splits creating easement problems, access problems, dusty roads, things like that. So there are many advantages to developing using the subdivision ordinance and looking at using strategies such as planned residential development versus allowing development to occur via a land division, because when a land division does come in for review, if it meets all the requirements in terms of zoning ordinance, minimum lot size and things like that, then we do approve it, but it's not looked at comprehensively in terms of, a broader impact. So the subdivision process is quite beneficial to everybody involved.
Any committee comments on item or LU4? Excuse me.
This is Brian. Would this include any attempt for wildcat splits?
Well, wildcat splits are something that do occur, and when we do
Find that for us, Melissa, just so everybody's on the same page.
So wildcat subdivision would be an instance where a property owner splits a land and through different methods are able to continue splitting it so it does not actually move through the subdivision review process. So you would have right now anything with more than 5 splits, so 6 and more, is technically a subdivision and needs to be reviewed under our subdivision process. And this is not just a county regulation. This comes from the state Department of Real Estate, and that's what governs the county's ability to regulate those land divisions. So if a property owner has 100 acres and they want to split it, they can split it up to 5 times without going through a subdivision. There's some other nuances there in terms of minor subdivisions and things like that. But and then that can be continued to split further and further down, depending on the owner, and new owners can buy a 20-acre parcel, for instance, and split that down further, depending on the limits of the zoning. So it does have a lot of impacts.
But Melissa, one question.
Yes.
When you said, okay, so somebody had it and they split it 5 times and then that was their gig, they couldn't split it anymore. Then the person that got one of the 5 that they split, then they could. So that's why it's wildcat, because the original person that had the lot can only split it 5. And so it keeps on going down. And that's what happened in Doney Park. So everyone that has a parcel big enough to split 5 ways can do it. And it goes down till it can't get down any further.
Right. And, again, we're governed, we're following the state Department of Real Estate rules on this. And
Because
that's what this policy is addressing,
Right.
is asking the state to potentially, provide additional flexibility. So, the county perhaps could develop tailored policies to meet the needs here in terms of how to regulate those. But right now,
what we're really saying is the county wants more power to regulate that.
Right.
Ultimately, that's
But the state says no.
right now. And I suspect was it Prop 207? It's going to be a difficult thing to sell, to get it anymore. But we understand what it is.
Okay.
Does anybody have any comments regarding LU4?
So I have a question. Do we need to address wildcat splits, or is that beyond the authority of this committee?
it's pretty much beyond the authority of what this area plan can do. And I think that's what this policy is trying to get to.
Okay.
This is as close as we can get to doing that.
So is this a nice way of saying wildcat minor land division process? It's a nicer way and more professional way of saying wildcat splits. Is that why we use this term? Minor land division process?
I would say that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and an additional comment for both Rob and Liz on that. You know, this is something that gets looked at pretty thoroughly when it comes to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation to the board. The idea is to compromise and to get something that is a planned subdivision or planned residential development so that we eliminate as much of this wildcat subdivision as possible. And it can be a pretty long, drawn out and difficult process sometimes.
Thank you, John. Any other comments on LU4 or questions? Okay.
Okay, so this next line that we're looking at is a new goal, that undeveloped Forest Service land in and adjacent to the planning area is preserved. And think back to the vision, that does track with what was written into the draft vision statement. And then so LU5 is a policy to support that goal.
Suitable for rural development.
Liz, I think you should read it.
Oh, okay.
Why don't you read it?
Question. Okay, I have a question for this. To preserve public lands as an open space, the rural growth boundaries established through Flagstaff area region plan should be implemented and enforced in order to define the extent of lands that are suitable for rural development. I've got a question on this one, and I talked to John a little bit about this morning. When I was looking up open space and I was looking through that big book that you gave me about open space and greenways, and around Doney Park, Timberline, and Fernwood, there were a lot of forests, and some of it was designated high priority retention and low priority retention. And it got me worried, like, oh my goodness, a lot around these neighborhoods are low priority retention. And then I looked up in our plan, and there was a paragraph, but John said, oh, it's going to be hard to rezone those. But in our own plan from last time it was done in 2000, it says, and this is why I just wondered if it says, you know, the last part of this, enforced in order to define exact lands that are suitable for rural development. In our own plan, it says, in other words, all the low priority retention forest lands are outside the established growth boundaries. This means if the plan is implemented and enforced, the low priority lands would not be available until the end of the 20-year planning period. That's now, period of the regional plan, unless the plan is amended. So that means for the last 20 years, all these low retention areas around the neighborhoods, that if you look in the green space and open space manual that you gave me, a lot of it is high priority, but a lot of it right adjacent or abutted neighborhoods, it looks like we're developing, it is low priority. So does that mean the Forest Service could do an exchange or say, we want that land to extend, we want it to be part developed now because it's so close to developments anyway, might as well develop the forest. And it's in that planning, that
Right.
green space and planning. And so when I read this, I was like, ooh, how do we change this? It says,
So the Flagstaff open space and greenways plan is what Liz is referring to. And if I am correct, I believe that was prepared in 1998.
correct.
And so what I do not know, and I imagine the Forest Service has updated those low and high priority retention areas.
I have an email into them. I do have an email.
So, right, because
Yeah.
we're not amending that plan, obviously. That's
Okay.
not part of our work here. We're amending the area plan. So this area plan policy, though, you know, would be reviewed, I would suggest when there is a Forest Service land exchange proposed by, you know, if we receive comments, for instance, if the county received a request for comments, and we review this area plan policy to comment to the Forest Service on in the event of a land exchange. And if you remember, when the Forest Service presented to us, there was no mention, they had no information or plans for any land exchange processes or requests that were in the works. So yeah, that's a good question, Liz. And I, because it's a 1998 document, I am not, I would not feel confident that those are actually, you know, updated maps in that plan.
Okay, just because a lot of people commented about access to the forest or leave the forest alone, they don't want land exchanges, but right in that green space, some are high retention and some are low priority, and a lot of them are right next to neighborhoods.
That's a good point, and thanks for bringing that up. I think, again, your area plan update here will, you know, be the most recent document that reflects your vision and the community's desire for what those lands, how those lands should be managed in the future.
One thing I'd like to add to that might help Liz a little more, after going over some of this stuff this morning, one thing that I perhaps forgot to point out is the fact that there is a large portion of that land that is already zoned, predominantly AR5 already.
On the forest?
Yes, if you'll take a look at the zoning map like we walked you through this morning.
Yep.
You can leave the parcel boundaries out, and on those areas that you are referring to, go ahead and left click on those, and or you don't even have to do that. It'll show up on the map, and it'll show up as AR5 on. So the questions you have are to a great extent already covered.
Okay. In that area, if you click on,
Right, and you can look at it and determine how much of that there is that is already zoned, and then after that, put on your activist hat and go to work when you find.
Okay, there you go. Right.
I have
Okay.
a question for the committee here, because I don't think this policy is very well written. It's not real clear exactly what it's trying to accomplish.
Oh,
Kind of,
Gremlin.
it uses a lot of different, phrases and words and tricky things. And I'm wondering if we couldn't better phrase this to what we're really trying to accomplish here, because I think what we're saying is keep the boundaries exactly where they are.
Right,
Don't turn over any Forest Service to development, right?
right.
Couldn't we say that more clearly here?
Yeah, Rob's got a good point. I agree completely with that. We're
Let's
kind of
make it
beating around
clear.
the bush here.
Yeah, the future users of this document should be able to read that and clearly understand what our objective was. And that was the boundaries as they currently exist need to be retained, and any development outside of those boundaries should be discouraged.
It says
Or
it
something
very
to that
well.
effect.
Yeah, that's it, pure and simple.
Pure and simple. Yeah, I had a hard time understanding. To preserve the public lands, open space for growth boundaries.
Here's one suggestion.
Any other thoughts on this particular policy, on how we move forward with it?
This is Brian. Rob, I agree with you because I was sitting here in a muddled puddle, not knowing what to do.
Muddled, fuddled.
Here's a suggestion. How does that read?
So I think we can simplify it even more, and that is the rural growth boundaries established by the Flagstaff Regional Plan should be maintained, period.
And any development outside those boundaries should be discouraged.
Yeah, that really nails it.
And
Have to
any
maintain,
development.
I think you say the same thing as
Mhm.
should be maintained in order to define the extent of lands that are suitable for rural development or suitable for development, period. Either way, it's good.
And I wonder if we need to put in there as currently established. So, effective right now, not a future regional plan that might change it, but as it's currently defined today.
I think that those growth boundaries have been in place for some time, and any change to those would be through the regional plan process.
Hey, Monica, perhaps you could mute your microphone, please.
I do. I just know it makes you happy.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, Monica. Maybe you could mute, please. Thank you. Okay, so we've modified this slightly.
Maintain suitable for rural development. Should be maintained in order to define the extent of lands for development, suitable for rural development. Why can't we just say extent of lands for development?
Yeah, take rural out. Also.
Take out that stuff, all that stuff between extent of lands. Yeah, define the extent of land for development or extent of land for development. Yeah.
Take out suitable, so you remove any kind of argument
Right.
about what's suitable or not. That just eliminates the argument.
Right. Extent of lands that are
Important to define.
Developable.
Wait a minute. Well, we almost got this.
Going to create some new English here. There you go.
I think that's better, much better.
It eliminates arguments and tiny ways of wedging things in.
Yes, you're exactly right, Harriet.
Yeah. I know too many lawyers.
All right, so has anyone got any further comments on land use 5, or are we good to go on? Good work, team. Moving on, Melissa.
Okay, the next goal is for housing opportunities exist for individuals and families with a range of incomes. So under that goal, to support it are two policies.
Yeah, before we go forward with that, in a previous section, we had talked about whether we wanted to address ranges of incomes and affordabilities and things like that in this document. And
Yes.
if I recall, we said, you know, that's going someplace we really don't need to go to in this document. And if that's the case, does that same philosophy apply here? Is the question I would like to ask the committee to start.
Yes, I think that does. And Rob, do you remember where it is so we can see the exact wording, how we did that? Because I remember we had a vote. Do you want to even address this or not? And we said, let's take it out.
Right. And I don't recall. It was somewhere previously in this section.
Right.
And I think it's also in your vision.
We took it out of the vision, I think.
I can reread, without switching screens, I can reread the land use growth development vision, if that would help.
Yes.
Our area plan supports responsible land use and planned growth that maintains our rural lifestyle and character. We embrace a future that accommodates residents while ensuring that new and additional development is integrated into our community in a manner that respects cultural and historic resources, supports community values and aesthetics, and considers the environment and long-term viability of natural habitat and water resources. I believe it previously read a range of incomes, and it had other language in it about opportunities.
So we took it out of the vision.
Right.
And if it's not in the vision, then it probably doesn't belong here.
Yeah, that I'd concur with Rob on that, because all the reasons we discussed about taking it out of the vision are the same reasons we would come up with for taking it out here. And
So I
that's
would
fine.
ask then, so you would want to remove this as a goal. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
If it's not, if there isn't a vision to support it, then it doesn't belong there. But if there are policies here that we think need to be addressed in some other way, then that would make sense.
Well, it may help to look at the two policies and think on the broader topic of those.
Let's review the two policies and then reconsider whether where this belongs. Or
hey, one thing I'd like to add to this, and talking to Don Walters, who's our vice chair of planning and zoning. He was one of the leading people on the last rewrite of the regional plan, and I think the activity centers were created in that, according to what Don had told me, that specifically to deal with the issue of multifamily housing, duplexes, that sort of thing. And in terms of that, they're pretty restricted area-wise, and they're not really specifically delineated in that regional plan. So I don't know if that'll help anybody form an opinion about that, but there it is for what it's worth.
Okay, so let's review LU 6 and 7 and then reevaluate.
Sure. So the policies that are written currently to support that goal. Number 6, the development of new multiple family parentheses condominiums, duplexes, apartments, townhouses, or mobile home parks. So the development of new multiple family projects should not be approved outside of rural activity centers. That's number 6. And then to go with that, assisted living, convalescent homes, and residential collective homes should maintain the rural residential character of the area. Extended public notice to nearby property owners for these proposed facilities should be customized based on the location for each proposal. So these are land uses, assisted living, convalescent homes, and residential collective homes that are allowed in certain zoning districts currently in the area plan.
Well, let's start with LU 6.
Mm-hmm.
So LU 6 is basically saying if somebody's going to build one of these types of developments, it's going to have to be in one of the 6 rural activity centers.
Correct, and that would generally require rezoning.
Right, because none of them are currently zoned for that. So as a committee, do we believe that LU 6 has merit in this area plan.
Okay, as guidance at the P and Z level that says, take a look at the regional plan as well as any other planning documents, that tells you, yeah, you got to look at this before you make a decision. Consider this carefully.
Right.
So leave it in there if that's what you want to say.
I agree. I think it's something that's important to be in there, and it does not, the wording now does not lead us into trying to define a whole lot of different things.
Yeah. Definitions, specific definitions could be interpreted as exclusionary or discriminatory if you aren't careful. So
Exactly.
Right. So LU6 has merit and we would like to see it retained. But I think, and we'll discuss LU7. Same kind of thing here. So if you're going to build one of these types of developments, it needs to fit into the rural character. We need to make sure there's widespread public notice about it before it can be approved as, I guess there'd have to be a CUP
Correct.
for that.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Harriet.
Okay, I've listened to the discussions about the downtown buildings and the takings law. And I've listened to that argument now for what, 4 years. And if we restrict developers who can otherwise build a certain kind of project that is multi family or multi-person, and we deny it, are we opening ourselves? And once again, I talk to too many lawyers, so just tell me. But are we treading into the area where if we put in restrictions and a developer says, I want to build X, Y, Z, and we say, here are these restrictions, he says, well, I won't make as much money. And so you're going to have to pay me compensation for the money I'm going to lose. Are we walking into that bear trap?
I don't think so in this case,
no,
because we're not rezoning. This doesn't, that would be in a rezone request.
It wouldn't apply here.
This is
right.
existing zoning that they would have to apply for. And so there would be no loss of value because the value isn't there to start with.
Yeah.
You're referring to number 7, correct,
Yeah.
Harriet?
Yes.
Rob is exactly right about that. And it's been a couple of years since I reviewed Prop 207 case law.
Yeah.
And it has been very difficult for the person who is bringing the action in court because they have to prove that the value of their property has been diminished by a decision made at the P&Z or the Board of Supervisors level.
And so we're not stepping into that trap.
Not with a policy document.
All right, that's all I wanted to know.
Okay, so it sounds to me like as the committee opinion is that both LU6 and LU7 have merit as they are currently written and should be in there. I think the question is whether the heading for this particular subsection does or doesn't belong there, and if LU6 and 7 perhaps could be relabeled as something more appropriate, because I'm not sure that it's really capturing what we're talking about below it anyway right now. Any thoughts?
Housing opportunities, period. Residential housing opportunity.
Remember, this is a goal. This is one of your residential goals. So it needs to be phrased as a goal.
Okay.
Well, it's a goal that doesn't fit into the vision anymore. So
well, the part that doesn't fit in the vision is with a range of incomes.
Correct.
So I think you could delete that. I'm not certain I like the goal just as that original statement, housing opportunities exist for individuals and families. That's not really a goal, that's a statement.
Yeah, Brian's right about that.
A variety of housing opportunities exist for housing or for families.
Individuals and families.
What about just housing opportunities? Something about housing opportunities exist within our planning area.
Or I think a variety, as Rob had suggested, would be a worthwhile addition to that. a variety exists. Very simply because you can go with a tiny home, a mobile home, any number of options.
And then just take out with a range of incomes and we're good. Yep.
That'll do it.
Yeah, I think that's better. I do have a question. Now, this is, are we going to address things like, let's say that there's a school, a private school that wants to be located out here, or some training center. That's not a residential program. Where would that fit in?
Also, a school would require zoning as a public, semi-public type of zoning. So that's most likely a rezoning request to develop that so that that type of land use would fit.
Do we need to address something of that nature? Let's say that there was a training program for, youth that are having emotional or, don't have the support at home that they need.
Well, I think there are probably a number of situations or a number of scenarios or providers that would address that type of population. So it could be, that could even be in a group home, or it could be a school. So there's a variety of providers that address those kinds of populations, and that could
Would
be.
that necessarily be a rezone, or could it be a CUP?
That's what I'm suggesting. If it was actually a school, then it may be a rezoning as a public or semi-public use, or it could just be a group home that requires a conditional use permit. It really depends on the scope or the scale of the actual facility and what the
Yes,
actual
it sounds
land
like you
use
have
is.
something to add there. Jess,
I'm sorry.
do you have something to add there?
Oh, yeah, just, it is possible to get a educational facility with a conditional use permit in all of the residential zones. So that is
Okay.
that is possible with a conditional use permit. But any residential component as a part of an educational facility would have to be accessory to the educational facility. So educational facility comes first. If it's some residential component to it, that's accessory to it, and that would go through the conditional use permit process.
So Jess, I have a question. Do we need to address that in this document, or am I fishing where there's no lake?
Well, you said it, not me, but no, I think that's already a use that's listed in the zoning ordinance. That is already an entitled use, so to speak. It's not entitled. It would require a conditional use permit, but there's many similar uses, as Melissa mentioned, different levels of group homes, group residential facilities. And with a few exceptions, most of those would require conditional use permits. They go through a public review process. So those are not residential development. There's some other purpose for those facilities. So I don't see that your land use section here really has a real interest in being concerned with those, the same way you're concerned with the character of residential development for future development. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Hey, Brian, I'll add a little bit to what Jess said about that. One of those things is the term collective homes covers that. And second, that we have had a number of cases like this, and the most recent ones in Doney Park, the consideration of the surrounding neighborhood and the environment and the rural uses around it were very important in making a decision as to what the conditions might be, what they might have been modified to, or whether or not approval of the CUP was granted.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, Jess, and he's absolutely right. Educational institutions are permitted, or rather allowed with conditional use permits across all residential zoning districts. So would not require the rezoning. He's correct.
As would be a religious institution, correct?
And that is actually, yes, it's called a religious institution, and that's a land use that's currently permitted with a use permit.
Yep. Any other thoughts on this goal or these two policies before we move on?
I know, I'm excited.
Excellent.
And there is somebody that needs to mute. I hear some feedback.
Yeah, Arena, perhaps you're not muted and might want to be. Thank you. There we go. Let's go with commercial goals, Melissa.
Okay. So now we're into the commercial. So that's the end of the residential land use goals and policy section.
That wasn't hard.
Good job, everybody. So commercial goals, the first goal is new commercial developments should be well-designed, environmentally responsible, and primarily serve the planning area residents. And under this goal, we have 4 specific policies. So number 8, LU8, adherence to performance standards listed in the zoning ordinance and this should say the design review guidelines, as well as the quality of proposed commercial development shall be used to evaluate requests for commercial zoning or for conditional use permits for commercial projects.
Any thoughts on LU8?
What about the word shall in there? I know that's.
Thank you, John.
Good catch.
There you go.
Any other thoughts on LU8? So we can move on to LU9 now, Melissa.
Okay, 9, only low water consuming commercial uses should be given consideration. This goes back to our earlier discussion where a policy is helpful.
Well, yeah, I have a little bit of a problem with wording that you're telling the applicant in a case like this that you don't even want to give him consideration. And I think under statute, you really don't want to say that. You should word it differently because it says if you come to us with a landscaping plan that uses 10 times the water we think it should, we don't even want to consider it at the planning and zoning or board level. I don't think you want to quite put it that way.
So could we say that the water consumption of the commercial use should be a consideration?
Should be a consideration, yeah. Much better way of wording it. Thank you.
Okay, I was going in different directions. So say.
Oh, I thought you were going to say low water consuming commercial uses should be encouraged, period.
I was going to say that.
Okay.
Liz read my mind.
Whatever is the stronger wording.
I know Doney Park Water they don't do high use water businesses.
Correct. That's right. Well, it's up to your committee, to the committee here.
Low water consuming commercial uses
should be encouraged is where I was going with that.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best out for that one.
And there are complementary policies in the water resources section that we've already reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we will cross-reference those.
I agree with encouraged.
I wonder about that because we're not in the business of encouraging or discouraging things in the area plan. We're suggesting the criteria that should be used when others are considering approval for those activities. So I will just toss it out one more time. I think we should be saying that the amount of water being consumed is what's important to us. So that's what should be considered when making a decision about a CUP or a rezone.
How about the extent of water use should be considered during the design review process?
That's what we want it to say, I think, right, John?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with John Ruggles' edit.
Were you able to capture that, Melissa?
Well, let's give it a try.
Hey, my attention span is no better than the proverbial gnat, so I hope you and others remembered what I said.
I think you said the extent of water use should be considered.
During or part of the design review process.
Yes.
Or
There you go. When approving.
here's
new
another way to
commercial
go.
development. That looks pretty good.
Does that resonate, Rob?
Hey, that really does it well.
Yep. That's what we're trying to really say here. Is the committee good with LU9 as it reads? Hearing no comments, we'll move on to 10.
Okay, and 10 reads, to minimize adverse impacts to adjacent neighborhoods, 9 to 5 businesses are favored. Otherwise, hours of operation should be limited to 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. No 24-hour businesses should be allowed. All illuminated signs should be turned off at the close of business or at 9 p.m., whichever is later.
Yeah, a little difficulty with the wording here. Let's see. Hours of operation. Yeah, that's good. The signage, that reads well. Oh gosh, I don't think I have a problem with any of this point. Pretty
I think
straightforward.
that tracks with the zoning ordinance.
Yes, it does.
Lighting ordinance too with the signs.
Yep.
Right.
All right, committee, are we good with LU10 as it reads? Hearing nothing, we can move on to LU11, please. Melissa.
Okay. Large retail developments, including big box retail, should not be permitted in the planning area.
Do we need to call out including big box retail? Are we poking somebody in the eye or?
We actually define this in the zoning ordinance.
Well, you know, that's really been controversial, and that was one of the things that probably came out of the development of Walmart in Flagstaff. You know,
Yes.
the city severely limited the square footage.
Well, my
And
point
that's
would
about
be-
the right
My
timing.
point would be, do we want somebody buying up 20 acres and putting a big, what are they called? Big box thing in the middle of Doney Park? Isn't that what we're saying?
Well, that would be a large retail development. We're basically repeating ourselves here.
Okay. I mean, we're not saying we are welcoming them. We are discouraging them.
They, not in the strongest possible terms, should not be permitted.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I think perhaps Rob has got a very good point. Big box is a current term of art. It may change down the road. Large scale commercial development, hey, that's wording that would have suited the 19th, 20th, and this century as well.
So it's not a big deal to me. It just seems like we're duplicating, you know, large retail and big box are the same thing, and neither of them should be permitted. If we're going to start detailing big box, should we also say fast food? Should we also say, you know,
So the zoning ordinance defines retail sales establishment, comma, large is a building greater than 25,000 square feet and less than 70,000 square feet. And
Hey,
that's
Rob?
again, retail sales establishment large.
I think that's the answer right there. We've
so,
already defined this in the zoning ordinance.
yeah.
What's
So-
the minimum size of that, Melissa?
25,000 to 70,000, and then retail sales establishment is in the other category.
Trying to think the size of 25,000 square feet.
What is the size of Sprouts? Because are we gonna defy Sprouts if they bring a big store out here? I say no.
I can tell you that Timberline is 10,000 square feet. So two and a
Okay.
half 2.5 Timberlines would be
2.5 Timberlines, okay,
just for a visual reference.
okay.
And hey, Liz, if you think the Planning and Zoning Commission is going to turn down a CUP for Sprouts out here, think again.
Good, good. I'd never have to go to town again. Very
Okay.
good.
Getting
Okay,
back to our
Sorry.
big box,
yes.
we can either include it or not. It's not a huge deal. It was just, to me, it seemed redundant and like we're kind of poking things.
Yeah, I'll sign up with Rob on that one.
Yeah, I concur with him.
Any objections? We can go ahead and delete that, Melissa, and then we can, I think, say we're good with land use 11 and move on to our next goal.
Okay, and this is still in the commercial land use section. New commercial projects should be located specifically in designated rural activity centers intended to serve and meet the needs of the local community.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And under this, just to get a scan, there are 4 policies, but some with some sub.
And that's the other thing is now their approach is like, well, we leave you alone too much. Now we're gonna leave you
Marina, I
alone.
think you got unmuted again. There we go.
Okay, so LU 12 is really a description of rural activity centers. And these, again, are your existing rural activity centers that have been in place since at least 2001. Actually, I think they were in place with the earlier plan.
They were, but they were not called rural
they were-
activity centers at that
okay.
point.
But they were designated, correct?
Yes, those exact same locations. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just read this, and it's somewhat long, but I'll go ahead and read it. And there has been a modification made. So it reads, other than existing commercial development located outside of a rural activity center, future commercial development requiring commercial zoning should be located in the 6 commercial rural activity centers listed below. These activity centers are intended to serve the local community and to provide opportunities to meet area residents' needs locally. The descriptions below provide a general indication of the extent of the rural activity center, but do not preclude additional commercial zoning in an activity center if future rezoning requests meet the criteria identified in policy LU 16 below. Note that Rural Activity Center R3 is a civic activity center and does not currently include commercial zoning, and that's where the school is on Silver Saddle. So, and these are the descriptions, and we do have if you need to go back to the PowerPoint, we do have a slide that shows where these are, but you've looked at these. They're
Yeah, I
on the
think
maps.
Everyone should be familiar with these already. I don't think we even need to read through them necessarily.
Okay, that's fine, because these descriptions have not changed.
Correct. Anyone have any comments to share about our definition of what a rural activity center is?
I think what's important to note is this sentence here. The descriptions below provide a general indication of the extent, but do not preclude additional commercial zoning in an activity center if the request meets the criteria as identified in policy 16 below.
One question I do have is, it talks about what, an intersection being, and the currently commercial zoned properties. So could, say, for instance, the intersection of Silver Saddle and 89, could commercial zoning be expanded beyond where it currently is and that be added to that activity center?
It could, and that's where this sentence is important to read, because the policy 16 then lays out the criteria for what those rezonings would need to meet.
Right. In 16,
Right.
It talks about the size, the shape, how far it can go. Those
Exactly.
things.
Yes. Otherwise, without that, there's no future rezoning. And then you are left with the existing commercial zoning in those activity centers. Which, as you know, there is some undeveloped zone, commercial zoning, but that would, mean that some of the commercial zoning, even something right at an intersection, may not be rezoned to commercial.
So this is Liz. So the activity centers can be civic, industrial, or commercial, and you're saying it can't.
No,
No.
all of these are commercial except the civic, the one civic activity center that you have now is where the school is.
Okay. So these are all
There's no commercial zoning there now.
in the civic, but it could be. Okay.
So kind of relating back then to our, did you have something else, Liz?
Yeah, I was gonna say, but it could be, Melissa, the civic activity could have commercial if it was the need of the neighborhood, like a hot dog stand or something like that.
If there was a rezoning and if it met the current criteria that are laid out in that number 16.
Okay, but not industrial could ever pop its head in. Okay.
Well, I mean, this specifically relates to commercial. Policies related to industrial are in the next section.
Okay.
And the activity centers are intended to be commercially zoned, not
Right.
industrial zoned.
That's what I wanted to know. Could they do that? So it's industrial. Okay.
I mean, these are very specific. This is very specific about, referring to just commercial, not industrial zoning.
Okay.
So relating back to the conversation we had where we clarified that we really wanted those forest boundaries we currently have to remain in place and we don't want to see anything expanded beyond those. I think that same kind of concept applies here, but I'm not sure that we're actually defining that very well in this particular section. And I would kind of like to see something that said, to the effect that expansion outside of the rural activity centers as they currently exist should be discouraged. Or something.
Well, I would again suggest that you look at 16. We read through the policies and then come back to this because
I've seen it, and I don't think anybody wants to see the current rural activity centers expanding out a whole lot. I think the majority of the folks here probably are satisfied with the size and shape that they are, and that they're adequately, fulfilling the needs of the local community. And
so in other words, you're suggesting that there be no additional commercial zoning at those intersections.
No, that the rural activity center boundaries as they exist are good.
The area doesn't grow.
But remember the way this is currently reads, because this policy that you're seeing here is the revised policy. The current policy does not contain this sentence here. So the way it's currently written, there could be basically no additional commercial rezoning, even at a corner of one of those intersections. So it's a bit of a catch-22 in that sense.
Right, a general indication of the extent of do not. And
so that sentence is not in the current document.
But
yes, go ahead, Rob.
I think we kind of do want to preclude additional commercial zoning if it's outside of the existing rural activities.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to clarify is there is no drawn boundary. It's just these descriptions of these intersections. So there's no hard boundary as similar to the rural growth boundary. It's actually a line on a map.
Right.
The activity centers are only defined by these descriptions here at these specific intersections. And so if you read the policy as it's written, it's only the land that is currently zoned commercial. That's your rural activity center. Even if there's a parcel closer to the next, rather closer to the intersection, that's residentially zoned, that's technically not an activity center.
Rob, are you thinking about like the map that we saw when we were looking at those activity centers that Melissa was showing us, the radius?
Yeah, that circle only means the pedestrian shed. That does not mean that that's the activity center. It's just the quarter-mile walking distance.
I have a question.
Yes.
Victoria, remember back in the day where we had that paragraph that talked about the welcome, the gateway to, and the welcome Gateway to our cultural Native American centers out to the east of us, and we pulled that out because I didn't think any of us had ever put that in. So I was raising the question: is there going to be a conflict that we see on the horizon? That there will be, in fact, some push to develop something like what was put in that we took out? And if so, what is our attitude going to be toward the development of something gateway-like to Navajo Native American treasures? What is going to be what are we saying about that? We're just ignoring it?
No, I'd like to add something to that relative to some discussions that we have had among members of the Planning and Zoning Commission over the years. Highway 89, I-40, and even to a lesser extent, Townsend Winona Road are de facto gateway corridors. Now, what you're talking about would be additional commercial development. And I think what's in the area plan, what we're stating about expansion of commercial development, very much like Rob has mentioned, we are saying that we do not want that kind of an expansion. And in order to get that, with the zoning we have right now in areas that are along 89 and some areas along I-40, Townsend Winona Road, would require rezoning to do that. And so I won't say prohibitions, but the admonishment to not expand commercial zoning within Doney Park, the Doney Park area plan are pretty well stated in this.
Okay, so I guess we should go ahead and read through till we get to LU 16, familiarize ourselves with that and the restrictions that are in it, because there are some. And then maybe come back to this and revisit whether we're achieving the ultimate goal here.
Does it make sense, though, that there is not actually a line on a map?
Oh, I understand that. And,
okay.
and it's kind of too bad there's not. And you know, maybe we should have, so that there isn't any ambiguity about it.
So it can't expand. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Well, line on a map is very difficult. And we just went through debating this sort of thing with the update to the zoning ordinance. Why limit the flexibility that you may have at the, community development, P&Z and Board of Supervisors level? Why put a statement in that says, we don't want you guys to cross the red line here? So flexibility is a good thing. Sometimes makeup of the commission could change and everything go out the window on that. Yes, I will acquiesce to the opinion I've heard on that. Yes, that can happen.
And it might be helpful to think about one of these descriptions, for instance, number 7, Camp Townsend, which is both sides of the highway. And this is the one closest to the Flagstaff boundary. So both sides of Highway 89 between Townsend, Winona, and the Flagstaff city limits. So that's currently described as the activity center, number 7, R7. But the way the policy is currently written, there couldn't be any additional rezoning to commercial, although I actually believe that's all commercial zoning, so that's not a great example. But all of these refer to existing commercially zoned properties, right? And it pretty much limits any future commercial zoning.
So in my reading of this, I think it's pretty clear what is available and what isn't available without having the lines on the map. I'm a little concerned about drawing those lines on the map because in 20 years, things may change. Of course, this document can change also. But I don't want to be overly prescriptive in what the rural activity centers can or cannot do.
I agree with Brian. I think we're putting ourselves in a box.
And Melissa, just for clarification, in your example, the property on both sides of Townsend, Winona at 89, on both sides of 89 are AR5. So none of that is commercial right now.
Between Townsend, Winona and the city limits?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm looking at the GIS map right now. We've been going for 2 hours. We can continue on and make some more progress, or if anyone would like, we could take a 5-minute break. Does anyone have a preference? Sounds like we're continuing on.
Well, I'm going to take a 5-minute break, whether anybody else does or not.
All right. Brian votes for a break. In this case, a vote of 1 is unanimous, and we'll take 5 minutes to be back here at 7:05.
Melissa?
Yes.
Oh, I got a quick question. This is Liz again. You got to go take your break, but you know, LU6, it's in a rural activity center, and it was under housing opportunities. And I thought we took that out because we didn't want duplexes, apartments, mobile homes in our area, and everyone agreed it. So we took it out on out of our goals. And then they're saying, yeah, let's have it. So we're saying rural activity, and I didn't want to slow us down because I didn't really think of it till after we passed it. Rural activity centers, which we're talking about like at Silver Saddle and 89, they could put mobile homes in there.
Well, it needs the proper zoning.
Yeah, it would require a rezone.
But see, that's what gets you, because we all said we took it out of the other one because we didn't want to say, yeah, we want duplexes and condominiums, and then all of a sudden we left it in there. But we can say, yeah, they can be there at rural activity centers, and we all agree on that.
Hey,
That's
Liz,
just
let me clarify something on that.
Okay. Because I thought that's why we took it out, because we don't want that.
Well, the whole idea with allowing, or theoretically allowing that only in the activity centers is somewhat compromised, because it's in there with the intention of keeping it there.
Not in the neighborhoods.
It's going to be there at all. And it's very difficult to accomplish because of the rezoning required.
Okay.
So it's kind of like 2 strikes against it already right there.
Okay. Okay. Because I think that's why we had such a disagreement, or not disagreement. I thought it was an agreement last time when people going, well, I don't want condos and high apartments and a mobile home next, mobile houses next to our places with big lots. And so we took that out, and then we go, oh yeah, we're going to put it here. But you're saying we've got to put it somewhere. And so rural activity centers kind of make it not so easy.
Yeah,
this further guides that.
To keep it
Okay.
To a very narrowly defined area.
Okay.
And it's going to be very, very difficult to even do that if you wanted to.
Okay. Because then once we left that, I was like, oh, that's just not sitting right. We're saying, yeah, I want apartments near my houses. I want duplexes. No, I really don't. And I thought that we had agreed that, but now I get it. We've got to put that in there, and that just kind of limits where it can go. Thank you for clarifying that up, all 3 of you.
Hey, I think you got it.
Okay.
Boy, Rob, that sucked up most of the 5-minute break.
Yeah. So we use our time very efficiently around here, right? Even when we're on a break, we're making progress.
Yeah, well, that's why I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking about stuff like this.
This morning, it was because the wind was blowing the sheets off of me.
Oh my goodness.
Last night.
Yeah.
Rob and Melissa, it's Julie. And just a little bit of background, kind of an interesting comment or interesting thought. So I served on the Regional Plan Citizens Advisory Committee, so in preparation. And on that committee, we really struggled with preparation of that exhibit that shows the activity centers. And that's why we call it an illustration and not a map. because we wanted the focus to really be on the goals and policies in the regional plan and not where we depict something on a map. So we called it an illustration. It was meant to be very fuzzy. That's why it doesn't show parcel boundaries, but rather just enough information to get people oriented to the idea, which was intended to really steer folks to the goals and policies, which are the which are what guides, you know, development and in that vision. So anyway, it was just we went back and forth for such a long time about that with Don Walters too, about how do we show this? And that's why we always said it's an illustration. It's an illustration. It's not a map. It's not a map. But anyway, for what it's worth.
Thanks, Julie. That's really great background. And it's interesting that in Belmont, because there is one activity center in Belmont, that group did very specifically define where they thought the rural activity center would be best located. So the committees do have the ability to do that, but it is, you know, specific to each planning area. So, but yeah, it is interesting to see when you look at the circles, it does tend to indicate a very specific area. So it's hard to get our minds around an image and not see it as what it is, what it actually is, something other than what it is. So, yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Julie.
And maybe a dash line or some different sort of outline would actually make that clearer or less clear.
Actually, a circle is obviously not a defining boundary in the sense that, you know, it's just a circle on a map. It clearly doesn't follow any lot line or any kind of
right.
other geologic or cartographic feature. So,
yeah, but a lot of people would look at it and say, "Oh, it has to be in that boundary."
Yeah.
Just like Julie said, that's a really interesting perspective.
All
Rob,
right,
should we get going?
7:07. Yes, ma'am. It is
Okay.
7:07, and we'll be prompt as we can here. So,
okay.
Picking up with LU 13.
Okay, so rural activity centers and other commercial developments should be designed in accordance with the design review guidelines of this plan and in a manner that is compatible with the rural character of the planning area, with size limits and design standards that maintain a scale and architectural character appropriate. And it seems like we've got some redundancy in here. So this is basically saying and reiterating that commercial developments will follow the design review guidelines, which are required. So remember, a commercial development, even if it does not require rezoning, would still need to follow the design review guideline standards that are in the plan. So they still need planning commission review on that matter.
Okay. Any comments on LU 13? Moving on to LU 14.
Commercial development should be limited to those proposing neighborhood commercial businesses, or at least those that would do a majority of their business in the planning area, as opposed to regional commercial uses that would be better located within the city. These neighborhood-oriented developments should be low-intensity types of businesses that will have minimal impacts on surrounding neighborhoods with respect to traffic, noise, lighting, and other issues addressed in other policies and the design review overlay guidelines.
Just one thing for everyone else, there is already a category for neighborhood commercial in the zoning code right now. And
Right.
that is exactly what we've got right here.
I'm kind of wondering, what was the intent of this statement in the first place? Is there a specific kind of development that we're trying to preclude or that we want to include? Or I know there were, in my case, there were questions raised. Is my business primarily serving the local community? And then the question became, what is the local community? Is it, you know, our area plan community? Is it the Flagstaff community? Is it Coconino County? So I'm wondering what the actual intent of LU 14 is, and if it's accomplishing it the way it's worded.
Well, I think I can help you out a little bit on that, Rob, because relative to what you said about the community that you serve, I had questions from some of my neighbors about this. And my answer to it was, well, in northern Arizona, where is another indoor range like Rob is proposing? His community is basically the northern third or almost half of the state. But the intent of this is mirrored in the zoning ordinance, and it's intended to be small mom and pop type businesses that serve the surrounding residential area primarily. I think that's the intent of it. I know that's when we looked at this in the zoning ordinance review, there was a little bit of discussion about that. And I think originally that's what it was intended to convey, that if somebody wants to have a small coffee shop, maybe a bookstore, maybe a small thrift store, something like that, that serves the immediate and surrounding area. But it also says surrounding community, and like Rob said, Timberline Firearms, when the discussion came to the Planning and Zoning Commission, I was one of the people who said, well, the surrounding community is the northern half of the state. So
Well,
it's dependent.
Yeah, the other thing I'd point out is my next door neighbor is a light manufacturing kind of a company, and they manufacture materials for nobody in the local area. But they provide some really good jobs for some of our local community members and are good neighbors.
And,
so would we be discouraging that kind of activity with this statement? And is that our intent?
I do not think so. But then again, you know, if somebody has a more restrictive attitude than say myself and others on the Planning and Zoning Commission, yeah, that could happen. But you know, this is concurrent with what's in the zoning ordinance right now when it defines neighborhood commercial.
Okay.
So I may have to eat those words, and I'm sure that if I do, Rob, you will remind me of that.
I'm good with that. Is any other comments from the rest of the committee on LU 14? Okay, I guess we're good with LU 14. We'll move on to LU 15.
Okay. It says spot zone changes are those that leave spots of commercially zoned land surrounded by residentially zoned land. And strip commercial zoning is that which results in a strip greater than 660 feet of commercially zoned land along a roadway. So spot and strip zoning. Because spot and strip commercial development impede efficient traffic movement, create aesthetic problems, and often conflict with existing adjacent residential uses, spot and strip commercial zoning should not be approved.
So this is just, yeah, well, maybe not for me.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, because strip and spot. So is that apparent now? Like people want to come in and change residential to commercial with these spots? I don't even understand why we even have this up. I didn't even know it was legal to do that.
The answer is yes.
Okay. So we're saying no, it should not be.
Want to do that.
Okay.
You know, we have the property just to the north of the Chevron station that was considered spot zoning when it was requested to be rezoned to commercial.
And what did they want to put in there?
RV storage.
Oh dear. Okay, that's what it means. Okay.
This is addressing how to organize development basically, and to discourage spot and strip zoning.
But we have a strip zoned piece right there at Solar Shadow, right? That's more than 600 feet across the front of that.
Yeah, but it may, I don't know when that was originally approved. It may, some of that development may even precede the zoning.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying, but I'm saying, is that bad? Do we look at that and say, gosh, I wish that wasn't there?
You mean, Rob, do you mean like the...
I haven't measured that, but I don't know. Is it greater than 660 feet along the highway there?
Tell you in 1 minute.
Yeah, Rob, you got the GIS map.
Yeah.
I don't think it is, because if you take a 2.5 acre square, it's 330 feet on one side, and looking at my property up over there, I don't think so.
I would agree with Monica, because that's over 2 football fields in length.
Okay to open up.
Well, I'll wait for what Rob comes up with when he does the measurement on the GIS map.
And it's not cooperating with me, letting me make a measurement right now. So it's just I'm just bringing up an example of what currently exists here today. And that might, I don't know that we agree or disagree that that's a good or a bad development, but that's an example of what we're talking about here.
Like that. You mean right next to Silver Saddle, that big strip where they have tents set up? What part of Silver Saddle are you talking about? That one?
That whole strip there, yeah, from Silver Saddle north.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's important to take a look, and I'm trying to open up the parcel viewer as well to measure that, because I don't believe that is greater than 660 feet.
Okay.
And let's see if this will open. Hang on.
Well, I think it's important to look at sort of the big picture in this respect, in that the idea here is to say to community development, P&Z, and the board that strip zoning or strip malls, whatever you want to call them, along with the spot zone changes are not what the people who are in Doney Park want to see, especially along routes like Highway 89. And I know back when Prescott Valley began to expand, you know, it was one after the other of
right
strip zoning along there.
Yeah.
So I got 1,070 feet of commercial space along the east side of 89 from Silver Saddle going north.
Is there any way to sort of insert in there the preferences for what we would like? And I'm just saying mine would be farmers markets, a nursery, like have violas move to the east side of town. But can we do positive things about the kinds of things the community would want to see? A Sprouts, a farmer's market. Are we allowed to say what we'd like?
I don't really think that you want to do that because of what is in the zoning ordinance right now in terms of what you have a right to put on commercial property.
And by default, then you would be excluding other things.
That's correct. Even
though we may want to do that.
I think that's what neighborhood commercial
that was
business
what I
is.
meant. Very good, Rob. You got my point.
And the other issue with this particular paragraph is we say that there is residential land in these rural activity centers that's currently zoned residential. So that would mean if we converted one piece of it to commercial, it is now a spot. And so it would preclude doing what we're talking about, saying kind of should be done in the rural activity center, not elsewhere.
I think, Rob, your definition of spot zoning in this case is spot on, if you will. As a matter of fact, that's an issue that came up with the proposed dollar store across from Silver Saddle on the west side of the road.
Yeah.
That was spot zoning and didn't get a very good reception at the Planning and Zoning Commission.
No. What does the committee think about this? Are we opposed to spot zoning or strip zoning? Is that some inside of the rural activity center general boundary that doesn't exist?
Well, you've just come up with a length of the property line along 89 for the development there at Townsend Winona. That's exactly what you don't want to see expanded in other areas that could be commercially developed. It becomes a mini strip mall. That's what they call them down in the valley. I think we're doing a pretty good job of saying this is not what we want to see.
I would suggest that strip zoning is probably, I would agree. On the other hand, aren't we kind of saying that within this rural activity center, it's okay to have some commercial. And, how that plays out is really up to the Planning and Zoning Commission and our county supervisors on a case-by-case basis.
That is exactly the way it's working now, and that is what you want. And it gets a very wide range of input on it.
Does the Planning and Zoning Commission, when they meet and look at the requests, look at our document and say, this is not the kind of thing that the document has thought they wanted to see come in, and then deny things? Or do you, if it's reasonable, if it's legal, if it would make money for somebody, you let it go? Does it make any difference what we want?
Yes, it does. And it makes a dramatic difference sometimes. I can attest to that. I know that I review the area plans before this sort of thing comes up, not just in the Doney Park area, but everywhere else it comes up in the county. So that is something that has resulted in a number of things, such as the development of a dollar store across from the Silver Saddle Market over there, stopped in its tracks when it got to the Planning and Zoning Commission level. I can't speak for everybody else on the commission, but I know I'm certainly vociferous about it, and I review this stuff. And other people on the commission do as well.
So there doesn't seem to be a consensus here for or against LU 15 as it currently stands that I'm hearing.
Well, I'm concerned about the way it's written, but I'm not sure where to go with it. And I think we do want to try to limit spot and strip development, even within, well, again, I don't want to get too prescriptive in this whole process.
Oh, I think that's what you've already got in LU 15.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at that at the commission level, I'm looking at that and saying, boy, we better look at this pretty thoroughly, because this is not what people want to see in an area like this.
I read it a little bit differently. That a stripped spot, commercially zoned land surrounded by residentially zoned land, that if it's we don't have boundaries on the areas there, but and so it looks like you don't. I'm trying to say that you would not want to stick a spot would be something that had houses around it. Okay, but if you have other commercial things around it, it's not really a spot then. It's just expansion of the particular area.
Well, I think if you do not specifically define a rural activities center, then anything you do like that could be considered spot zoning if it is a change from, say, residential to commercial of one form or the other. I know that's talking like an attorney here, but I think we've had to deal with this at the P&Z Commission level to one extent or the other over the years. I know the Chevron gas station might be an example of that. It's a pretty small area. It is not an activity center, but it changing the zoning of the property that was just to the north of it on the other side of Campbell is really spot zoning.
Huh. Even though it would be adjacent to an existing commercial.
That's
right.
not an activity center,
And
though,
it's
is
not
what the point is.
not
Right.
an activity
Yeah.
center. But even in an activity center, I think you would look at it and say, well, if it is predominantly still residential within a designated activity center, that if you want to change one of the residentially zoned lots that is within that somewhat defined activity center, you might consider that spot zoning. It depends on the makeup of the surrounding residential area.
And remember, this is a guide. This is not a shall. So this is where, as John mentioned, there's the flexibility for taking a look case by case at the proposal. And then number 16 is really what guides change of zoning in those activity centers. So even if they're described at certain intersections, then a rezoning would follow the criteria in 16. And number 15 then is another filter in which to look at what the impacts of that rezoning request could be. So there's not some sort of leapfrog development, for instance, and then all of a sudden there is a strip of commercial running up and down 89, which I think in my reading of this, that's what this is speaking to, where the previous, residents in 2001 thought about this and were looking to avoid that type of long strip development. And this is what was proposed, what they came up with.
I'm going to propose that since we're kind of stuck here, that we move on. We'll kind of put this on hold like we did back with LU, I think it was 6. Get into at 16, since that's the one that really drives the decision on all this anyway, and then come back and revisit. So,
right.
Unless anyone opposes that idea, let's move on to new commercial development should occur only on existing commercially zoned land.
May I make a quick request?
Yes.
Melissa, would you make some notation there to come back to LU 15? Because I'm not sure we're resolved on it.
Right.
Thank you.
No, we're not. Just highlight it or something.
Well, let me get this back as far as my layout here. Okay. So 16, and again, this comes into play for under rezonings as well. So this policy up here is what LU 12 directs to down to policy 16 in terms of evaluating a rezoning. Okay, just to put that back into context. So 16, rezoning from residential to commercial is strongly discouraged and should be considered only as described in the section. Every effort should be made to utilize existing commercially zoned land prior to requesting a rezoning to commercial. Rezoning may only be considered if there would be an overriding public benefit to residents of the planning area and the zone change meets all of the following criteria. Move on to 16A. Okay, 16A, the land is within one of the existing rural activity centers as identified in this plan, see LU 14. So they refer back to each other.
So there's the problem. We just agreed that the rural activity centers aren't defined.
Well, they're described. Oh, sorry, it's a touchy touchpad here.
It says within the existing rural activity center, but our rural activity centers don't have boundaries.
Right. That is.
They don't have boundaries, but it says where it is. Existing commercially zoned properties at 89 and Burris. You're right. It's very specific about where they're located, and they're all located at intersections.
So what's the boundary?
The boundary is the existing commercially zoned property.
Nope, that's what we're trying to rezone it to, isn't it?
No. You've got to know. If we look at the map, we could pull it up. There are existing commercially zoned properties at all of these intersections.
And they have boundaries, because he's saying there isn't, and that's what we didn't want to keep expanding. So,
well, by the way this is written, then the boundary would be around those existing commercial properties.
And is it exclusive only to those existing properties, or is there some assumption that the land around it could also be rezoned commercial?
Well, that's the exact conundrum here, because the way the plan has been written and the way the rural activity centers are described, they are the existing commercial zone properties at those intersections. And then 16 talks about if there is a rezoning request, what are the criteria to approve a rezoning request basically you could think of near that activity center. So near, right. And
technical term there.
Can we, as a commission, can we suggest some boundary that doesn't exist now that could say we would consider existing commercial activity centers as what's standing now, and any additional 5 acres northeast, southwest, we could define it.
well, and I think that's what 16 is getting to, because
Okay.
it talks about, if you look at D, just to jump down, rezoning is limited to 660 feet
Yeah.
of frontage on arterials and 330, which equals 5 acres.
Right. But the point is, we don't want the entrance to Prescott Valley, that endless strip mall. I think that's what we're trying to prevent. And that's the language I think we ought to be looking at, is what will prevent it. We will have what we need, but we won't have a continuous commercial strip.
Right. And the way it seems from reading the policy 15 that we didn't finish reviewing the spot and strip, that's what that's trying to avoid by concentrating and focusing commercial developments at those activity centers.
Well, maybe that's what we really want to make sure that we rework for the next session and have something cleaner.
That's
just I've just got a quick question for you, Melissa. I'm not sure where we are as a committee, where we're at, but let's see, LU 16D, the statement is rezoning is limited. Here again, that is, it should say should be limited. Since this is a policy document, it is not a regulatory document. We really can't say that. We can at the Planning and Zoning Commission level, however.
Okay, I got that changed.
And
I captured that.
And that definition doesn't work at the intersection of Townsend, Winona and 89. Because there it's beyond 5 acres because it goes all the way to the city border.
Well, that one is beyond 5 acres, and that's the existing commercial zoning.
Except there's very little commercial zoning to begin there. At Townsend, Winona, there's none. It doesn't begin until you get closer to the city.
Oh, I thought because at Townsend, Winona, at that corner, I thought that was Forest Service.
It looks like it probably is that whole.
Yeah.
So the rural activity center there really shouldn't include Townsend, Winona, because then we're saying that's where we want to see development on forest land.
Right.
However, you're stuck with that definition in the regional plan.
Yeah, I would agree that that's worded. It's a confusing wording for that because it does include the Forest Service land. And if you look further south then to where there is private land, a lot of that is already commercially zoned.
Right.
So they were picking a point to just use, they were picking a road in order to describe that, but that's.
Well, here again, one thing about this, it is, I guess, amorphous description at best. I always think about Justice Brennan when asked about pornography. Said he couldn't define it, but he knew it when he saw it. And that is kind of the case here with activity centers.
Yeah, I agree. It's been, I don't think we can come up with a design, something that is specific enough to do what we'd kind of like to have it do, but not the way, you get too specific, we're going to get into trouble later on.
So this conversation started after reading A, I believe.
Right.
And we're basically, I think we have agreed that there just isn't any good way right now, certainly within the confines of this document, to define a border for a rural activity center. Am I correct in assuming that we agree as a committee that that's the case?
I've got to agree with you on that one, Rob. That's
And
how I
if
look
so,
at it.
then A probably needs to stay as is. It has worked for 20 plus years. And apparently is being accurately interpreted and understood by the folks that use this plan to make decisions. So I would suggest we can say A works as is and move on unless someone has an objection.
Move on.
Okay. 16B, adverse impacts on the adjacent neighborhood are minimized.
As they should be.
Neighborhoods could probably be plural.
Can't hurt.
Number C.
Please.
16C, the zone change is limited to the land area needed for the planned use.
Yes, that was very important in making a decision to turn down the zoning request for a dollar store across from Silver Saddle.
Okay. Any objections to C? Moving on.
Okay, so D, we've read rezoning should be limited to 660 feet of frontage on major arterial. So that would be 89, for instance, and 330 feet of frontage on collector roads, which would be Burris, for instance, which results in a maximum of 5 acres at each corner of the intersection. So northeast, south, and west corner could each have 5 acres at the intersection.
Not necessarily. You can do that without the 5 acre maximum.
It could be less. Is that what you're thinking, John?
Yeah, yes, it could be.
Right, for a maximum of 5
And,
acres.
As such, or you could say, which should result in a maximum of 5 acres. You can look at that at the decision-making level and say, okay, well, maximum is 6 acres, so we don't want to approve it.
I'm confused at what you're trying to say.
Just changing to should.
You lost me, John.
Okay. You could say which should result in a maximum of 5 acres at each corner of the intersection.
We just took out the,
If you took out the dimensions and just said that, then we would accomplish what we're trying to do.
Yeah, you could do that. That would probably simplify it even more.
Well, in those dimensions, it couldn't be more than 5 acres.
Not necessarily. It depends on what the configuration of the property is.
Okay, I'm just a math
Okay.
geek, but I'm just gonna say.
If it's 660 feet long and 50 feet wide,
Then it can't be more, it won't be more than 5
it
acres.
won't be more than 5 acres at that point.
Yeah,
It'd be
like I said,
600.
my 5 acre piece is 660 by 330. My 2.5 acre piece is 330 by 330.
And you've got very regularly shaped property. And that's where the problem comes in. If it's irregularly
Is
shaped.
that what you're trying to say? If it's not rectangular?
Right.
It's not
If it-
rectangular, it's still.
If it is not
If with those
some-
dimensions, it still couldn't be more than 5.
It probably won't be, but I suppose just saying that it should result in a maximum.
John, what about saying should not exceed a maximum?
Hey,
of
there you
5
go,
acres?
Brian. There you go. I think that's probably a far better way to do it.
Are we trying to put dimensions in there so that somebody doesn't do their 5 acres that's, 30 feet wide and a gazillion feet long?
I think you've got it. This is the kind of thing that you got to see in other jurisdictions far to the south of us. The city of Phoenix managed to do a lot of that just because somebody wanted to make a buck off of it.
So by changing that to should not exceed 5 acres.
But they could still go skinny and forever.
Well, we're leaving the dimensions in and saying, in addition to the dimensions, it should not exceed 5
Should
acres.
not exceed 5 acres.
Right.
Hold on,
I
let me.
agree with leaving the dimensions in.
Yeah, that'll work just fine. It should not exceed a maximum of 5 acres at each corner.
Or just see, should not
Yeah.
exceed 5 acres.
Yeah, now we don't need maximum anymore, period. Everybody good with Delta as it exists now?
Yes.
To go.
Let's go for E.
Okay. E, new commercial zoning should abut or be directly across a road from existing commercially zoned property.
Well, rather than directly across a road, the terminology you usually see in planning documents for that is adjacent to, and that covers across the road.
So abut or be adjacent to?
Abut or adjacent to, and adjacent to would mean the other side of the road.
Okay.
Or actually, that's what it does mean.
Okay.
Okay. F.
Please.
Input received from planning area residents generally support the zone change, including from Planning and Zoning Commission and Board of Supervisor meetings, as well as community and neighborhood meetings where the zone change is a topic of discussion. So it's a criteria that the rezoning would meet.
Which is true regardless of whether we put this in here or not. And
Right.
is true about almost everything else in here because
Right.
public meetings are required. And
right.
I question whether there's any value in F at all in here. Other than perhaps leaving the first sentence, input received generally supports the zone change, period.
Kind of think that just for the people reading it or for any of the residents, I think they want to be able to see where, you know, their vote counts. And
Where that opportunity exists.
Right, right. And it does anyway, but I think it helps them seeing it that, yes, it's there, we have a say.
It doesn't hurt anything having it there.
Right.
Very good suggestion.
Okay. Any objections to leaving Foxtrot as is? Moving on to golf.
Golf, compliance with the other policies in this section is demonstrated.
With other policies in this section, what is this section? Define?
Yeah, what does that mean? I don't even.
The commercial policy, so
Commercial.
goals and policies.
Yeah.
What?
Redundant, but I think it's useful.
Let's maybe clarify what this section means, since a couple of us even asked.
Okay.
And now that we've gotten pretty much through that, I'm going to throw out there that a property that got a lot of attention not too long ago that's residential and might be considered for rezoning, that's outside of a rural activity center but along 89, would be looking at the commission would be looking at these criteria for what to do with horsemen's. And so that's something we ought to probably be keeping in mind as we're writing these. When that question comes up, are there things in here that we should or should not include to be consistent with what our community wants to see?
And Rob is exactly right about that. And the commission would be looking at that pretty thoroughly up until a point where it becomes trust land, of course. But if it's not trust land, yeah, that would be scrutinized very closely.
And it doesn't meet most of these requirements for already. So I think that we have probably, you know, already got it covered. But I do think it's also something worthy of some consideration because of how important this has become to our neighborhood. Are we adequately providing the tools necessary to P&Z and the supervisors in this document to enable them to make a decision that supports what our community wants?
Yeah, and the more emphasis you get on that, the better. And like I said, I can't speak for other people on the commission, but I read this and do the best I possibly can to comply with what's in a planning document like this, specifically this one, before I can make any findings relative to what we do at the Planning and Zoning Commission.
You know, that rezone would put commercial property abutting, it would convert existing residential to commercial abutting other residential. And those folks would not be happy.
Well, just to clarify and are you speaking of the Horseman's Lodge?
Yes.
And just to clarify, that is existing legal non-conforming use as
Right.
it is.
So it's zoned residential right now.
Correct.
Yep.
So if they were to rezone it commercial, the folks that are bordering it that are residential would be very unpleased.
Yeah, I think we would see folks with torches and pitchforks at the P&Z Commission hearing for that.
All right, so I just wanted to toss that out there as food for thought, because that's what this section right here is what's going to be used when that comes to them.
Well, and keep in mind, you know, if the current restaurant use is continued, then a rezoning is not required because it is existing legal non-conforming.
Right.
And they have maintained that throughout the pandemic by basically, you know, reopening again and resetting their clock on commercial use. You know, any other type of use other than the restaurant, you know, would not be permitted. And then would require rezoning, but that, you know, existing use could continue. I'm not sure that a rezoning would ever be contemplated for that, but it's possible.
And reopening is generous, considering all they're doing is parking a food truck in the parking lot for a day. But we'll move on.
Right. Okay, so should we go to 17 then?
Well, we said we were going to review 16, get a better idea what the criteria was, and then go
Right,
back and
okay.
look at 15 and I believe
And 12.
or 12, yeah.
Right. So here's 12 because 12 refers to 16.
I thought, no, we were good with 12, I thought.
Okay.
Does anybody have any issues with 12?
I suggested that we come back to it after we'd gone through 16.
Okay, because it referenced 16, right, Brian?
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so
We'll
now
go to
that we have
15.
looked at 16, is
Mhm.
everyone comfortable with 12 as it stands?
Let's, can we just read it to ourselves? Yeah, just for a minute.
Sure.
Now we got to move down to 16 because now I forgot what that said.
Melissa, could we zoom ahead to 16 for just a second?
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you. So this is just the criteria that we just discussed.
Mhm.
Any rezone request would have to meet this
Mhm.
criteria.
Mhm.
And this is kind of where I see that disconnect, because in the previous section, we said it's okay to rezone providing we meet this criteria.
Mhm.
But then we say spot rezoning and that kind of stuff shouldn't happen, even though it would have to in order to add commercial in some of those areas. But
No, not necessarily though, because you've got existing commercial zoning there and it could abut or be adjacent to that.
yeah,
No, I thought we were talking about rezoning. So what do you mean there's residential and commercial? Oh, and some of those listed above? Oh my gosh, this is getting complicated. Only be considered if there be.
So I'm okay with LU 12 and LU 16.
I
I'm
want to
still
raise a
concerned-
point on F.
Okay.
Okay, input received from planning area residents generally supports the zone change. What is that going to mean, including from Planning and Zoning Commission and Board of Supervisors, as well as community and neighborhood meetings where the zone change is a topic of discussion? Generally, doesn't, it just means a 51-49, or does it mean nobody cares? It seems to me that leaves a lot of wiggle room. Just saying.
Yeah, and for the sake of
I'd have
them-
to
I agree.
agree with you on that, Harriet. The generally caught my attention when we first looked at this, because that means exactly what you have described.
But we can't dictate it must be 54.45%.
Nope, you just take the word generally out.
Nor is there any way to determine what 54.54% would be of.
You just take the word generally out.
That was my thought exactly.
All right.
Okay.
When you,
Great, we're good with that.
Okay.
like I said about the torches and pitchforks, you have a whole bunch of folks show up.
That's
Hey,
my
Rob.
specialty, John. John, I bring the pitchforks. Remember that.
Okay.
My job.
Well, I'd like Rob to think about his initial CUP hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission. We had quite a number of participants, and I believe it was over 60, and there was only one negative person. So I say that is a pretty good level of support for what he wanted to do. And we see that more often than you might think, but generally, no, I think that needs to come out.
I did revise that, if you can
Okay.
see. Rob, I want to put it as 7:51.
Yep. I'm hoping that we can get through 15. We wanted to go back to that, and we've been deep into this.
Okay.
So
There
let's
it
look at
is.
15 again now. Our goal here, team, is to get 15 agreed upon. And the big question, I believe, is what are we trying to accomplish with LU 15 as it's currently written? And is that what we feel is important in this case? And if so, is it worded in a way that effectively communicates that?
So from a planning perspective, reading this, what this is attempting to address is to avoid development like we've heard discussed. People are not in favor of, such as in Prescott Valley, where it's miles of strip development, or conversely, where there is a one single property surrounded by residences, which is a spot zone. And the chevron that John pointed out is considered a spot zone location. So, this is a general policy that is guiding how commercial development should be concentrated, essentially.
So Melissa, I think the first thing to do is to simply define what a spot and what a strip is before getting into.
Yeah, the first sentence, let me unhighlight it. It may be easier to read.
Well,
because the first sentence attempts to do that. Spot zone changes are those that leave spots of commercially zoned land surrounded by residentially zoned land. And strip commercial zoning is that which results in a strip greater than 660 feet of commercially zoned land along a roadway.
I think that can be simplified.
Well, I'm going to give you my opinion on this. I think that's pretty good as it is, because that is to a degree specific to the Doney Park area plan. Spot zoning, as we are defining it here, is essentially what we want to avoid. Spot zoning can be any zoning in anywhere that is not consistent with the surrounding zoning in a number of ways. So we're saying that the predominant value should be given to residential zoning when anyone requests something that would leave that spot of commercially zoned land surrounded by residential zoning.
So I'm not disagreeing with you here, John. My objective here would be to say spot zones are where commercial land is surrounded by residentially zoned land, and strips are up to 660 feet of commercially zoned land along a roadway. Just define what those terms are.
Well, I think you've got the definition right there. If it
Already
extends,
written, right.
if it
Well,
extends 660 feet, then it is strip.
I get
zoning.
that. What I'm saying, you start with spot zone changes. Start
you
with what the spot is, and then say zone changes that result in spot or strip properties should not be approved.
That's a clearer way of presenting it, John, for those who don't deal with that stuff all the time. First you define it and then use it.
Is that not how it's written currently?
And that's exactly how I look at it as written.
I read it.
Defined it. You've
Right.
defined it. And the other thing is, I believe spot zoning is in the definitions for the zoning code. Melissa, I'd appreciate it if you would correct me on that if I'm wrong.
I'm looking it up right now.
I know other jurisdictions do define it in their zoning codes.
I do not see that we've defined it.
Well, what we have here defines it fairly well for what I think Doney Park residents want. And that is, it is more narrowly defined than I have seen spot zoning defined by other jurisdictions in the state. Because we're saying, okay, it's spot zoning if it's surrounded by residentially zoned land. And that's getting pretty specific about it.
Well, I'm keeping the same basis. I'm simply saying, define what it is you're talking about, then state what you want to do with it.
Okay.
That's what I'm suggesting.
You've done that. You've defined it. You define spot zoning.
It's confusing in the
strip
reading.
zoning. Well, maybe it's because I'm all too familiar with what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, I think, yes, I would agree with that. You're more familiar with this than I am, for sure.
But
I
when I
could
look at it,
suggest working on this and bringing it back to you. Or Brian, if you've got a suggestion on a different way to reword this, maybe you could email it to me and we can incorporate that into this.
I think that's a good idea, Melissa. We're approaching the bewitching hour
8,
here,
yeah.
and
Right.
we've
And
invested
some
a lot of time in LU15. We don't seem to be able to get a good feeling out of it for everybody here. So I think this is we've completed 16. Gosh, what's 17? Is 17 something we can look at real quick and say all we have left in that section is 15?
Hang on, let me make a note here. Sorry.
Yeah.
yeah, Brian, why don't you do a rewrite and then we can drag you over the coals dealing with this.
Should I get out the computers to help you?
I think.
Okay. All right. We'll look at, you wanted to look at 17?
Real quick at 17. That way we'll finish.
Okay,
this particular
okay.
section.
17, environmental impacts should be carefully considered in reviewing commercial requests. Those plans showing sensitivity to the natural environment, including the preservation of views, trees, and native vegetation, should be favored.
Anybody have any thoughts on changing anything with LU17, or are we good with it as it stands?
Looks good.
All right, so we have completed that section with the exception of LU15, 1.5. We will make that our #1 topic of discussion at our next meeting after we receive inputs from Brian and anyone else that would like to try their hand at rewording that. And we will call a pause to our review of this document for this evening, unless I hear any objections from anyone.
How much further do we have to go? I want to do it tonight, but show the document. How much more do we have to do?
Hold on, let me just finish this
Okay.
note.
2 pages.
Okay.
It's really 1.5, isn't it?
Yeah, 1 2/3 or
Okay.
not a lot, but
Okay.
it deserves our attention.
All right.
We've
I'll just
got-
scan it. I'll just
Right.
show you real quick. It just goes, and then we jump into industrial, public, semi-public, and then zoning enforcement. So those are the sections to finish.
Okay.
And let me just jump back to the presentation because we'll talk about the next meeting.
Which I believe we've already got a date for.
Right. And let me just do this.
And the general public here, please stand by. We do have a public comment period at the end of this session also. So if there's anything you would like to share with us, don't go away yet.
Okay. So the next meeting is scheduled for 2 weeks. You decided this last time.
Yep.
So on June 24th, same time, starting same time, 5 to 8. Continue with this, and my thought would be that we could finish the land use goals and policies and possibly get started on transportation. We will make that as our goal because, as we said, transportation is the last section. And then with that, we have this slide.
Okay, I would like to open the floor for public comment again. If there's something that you would like to share with us, we are anxious to hear, and waving a hand or raising a hand or just unmuting and saying hello will work here. Mr. Leroy.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Rob. Okay, 2 questions. First of all, regarding Liz's remarks, can someone either in the chat or email point me to the map showing the high priority and low priority retention forest areas? This is a follow-up so I can review those for myself.
Melissa, you could probably get that in chat or at least
I can email that. It's the document that, like I said, anyway, I can email it.
No, I apologize for being ignorant. Thank you for your support. Secondly, with respect to the remarks earlier in the presentation regarding shall and should, was that Jeff McNeely who made those remarks?
That was Jeff.
Excuse me, we're getting a lot of feedback.
There we go. Thank you. That was Jeff McNeely. Yes.
Okay. Hi, Jeff from Wichita. Been there, still doing business there. I have 4 questions for either the committee, Jeff, and or the county attorney very quickly. 1, can you ask the county attorney who made the recommendations with respect to the usage of the words shall or should? I'd like to see the language that attorney relied on when he made the recommendations to the committee. That's first question, and I'll send these to Melissa in an email. Secondly, assuming there are specific limitations to the conflicts of language, what are the plans of the county attorney to mitigate the enforceability of these terms in the prior existing plans? Second to last, if there are no plans by the county attorney to mitigate the enforceability of those terms in prior plans, then why did the county attorney make the recommendations regarding this plan? Those are my questions.
Okay. And you will forward those to Melissa so that we can get those formally submitted. Thank you.
You bet.
Open floor for the general public here. Any other thoughts that we can share this evening? Go ahead and unmute yourself and say hello if you have a thought to share with us. And if not, I'm hearing none. I'm going to open the floor to the committee members for any final thoughts they may have before we wrap this meeting. And hearing none, in case someone missed the chat, Supervisor Vasquez wished us all well, had to depart a little early, but said thank you very much for your efforts. And for those of the general public who want to stay engaged, here's some great links that give you all the access to all the actual factual data. And we encourage you to stay up to date with that. The other thing you can make sure to do is email Melissa Shaw, mshaw@coconino.az.gov. That'll get you added to the email list, and you'll be notified automatically of any updates to this process. So with that, I think we can say we have just completed this meeting of the Doney Park Timberline Fernwood Area Plan Committee. Thank you all for all of your hard work and attention to this evening, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.